Yeah. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. I'm Leslie Medvedow, Executive Director of the Rappaport Center for Law and Public Policy. On behalf of Abby Chingo, Administrative Assistant, and Dan Canstrom, Faculty Director, welcome to today's recorded program on reentry or reentry symposium. I want to pause for a moment here to give a special shout out to Abby Chingo for all of her work on the symposium, as well as every other Rappaport Center program we've held for the past 2.5 years. None of these programs would happen without her. Abby, thank you. Okay, now let's talk about today. Our first panel brings together public officials at the highest levels of government who are deeply involved in reentry initiatives. And for the second panel, we will hear from individuals directly engaged in working for and with formerly incarcerated individuals in the areas of education, housing, jobs, and social services, as well as those with lived experiences as a formerly incarcerated person. Medical services, including substance abuse disorder and mental health, will be incorporated into today's discussions. Often my introductory remarks include statistics honing in on the issues to be discussed, but today I will leave the presentation of data to the extraordinary panelists on both panels today. They are respected experts in this field and will share with us what's currently happening within prisons and jails and what's happening outside of the walls to facilitate incarcerated individuals returning to their own communities and to new localities, providing assistance, guidance, support, and resources to people leaving prisons and jails with dignity and respect. I think it's fair to say is the goal of everyone here today. In planning this symposium, I had the distinct privilege and joy of collaborating with Anthony Benedetti, Chief Counsel of CPCS, the Committee for Public Counsel Services. For those of you who don't know Anthony, he is one of the smartest, most collegial, and nicest people you will ever meet. Let me tell you a bit about his background before turning over the microphone and the rest of this first panel to him. Anthony is a career CPCS lawyer. Right out of law school, he joined CPCS as a public defender in Brockton, representing clients in Plymouth County District and Superior Courts. In 1998, he was promoted to CPCS General Counsel, where he provided legal counsel and support to the Chief Counsel and served in a leadership role to execute the agency's fiscal, human resources, and operational responsibilities, both internally and externally, including working with all 3 branches of government on budget and legislative issues. In 2010, Anthony became the big muckamuck Chief Counsel of CPCS. He is an active longtime member of both the Massachusetts and Boston Bar Associations, as well as both Massachusetts and National Associations of Criminal Defense Attorneys. Anthony is also a member of the National Legal Aid and Defender Association and the National Association for Public Defense. And perhaps most importantly, from a purely personal perspective, he is one of my favorite members and esteemed member of the Rappaport Center Advisory Board. Please welcome Anthony Benedetti.
Thank you. Thank you for that amazing introduction. When you started off, I thought maybe someone else is coming to run this program in my place. Well, I want to say this is been a joy setting this up with Lissy. It's wonderful to have such a great turnout, and hopefully there were a lot of people watching at home or at work online. I'm really excited to be having this conversation with this panel to my left. I want to thank Boston College Law School and the Rappaport Center, who they really produce so many amazing programs covering a wide range of topics. Obviously, my personal interest is those that have to do with the criminal legal system, and that's what we're here to talk about today. I'm going to start off by introducing you to the panel. going over their biographies, which are in your program, and then we'll start getting into some of the questions. Hopefully you write down some questions that you have for the panel members, because we'll have an opportunity afterwards to engage in that process. So immediately to my left is Andy Peck. He is the Undersecretary of Public Safety in the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security. He has been in that role since 2019. He oversees a number of agencies, but specific to what we're going to talk about today, he oversees the Department of Correction and the Parole Office. Prior to that, he spent a number of years in probation, so he clearly brings a number of years of expertise to this conversation. Next to him is Sheriff Stephen Tompkins. He has been the Suffolk County Sheriff since 2013. He is responsible for the care and custody of individuals serving time and held pretrial at both the jail and House of Correction. And he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's approximately 700 individuals in the jail, 500 individuals who are sentenced at the House of Correction, for a total of about 1,200 people. And so obviously he brings his perspective and expertise to this conversation. To his left is Representative Brandy Fluker Oakley. She may be one of my favorite individuals on this panel for two reasons. One, she is a graduate of Boston Latin High School, where I went, and so we have that in common. And she is a former public defender at the Committee for Public Counsel Services, so you can see why I may be a little bit biased there. She is the representative of the 12th Suffolk District, which includes Mattapan, Milton, Dorchester, and Hyde Park. She serves on several committees, including the Judiciary and the Racial Equity, Civil Rights, and Inclusion Committees, and to representatives. To her left is the Commissioner of Probation, Pamerson Ifill. He is approaching, I think, his first year anniversary after being appointed commissioner, after a 30-year career in the Department of Probation. He oversees probation, office of community correction. Prior to that, he was a deputy commissioner of pretrial services. He's been a chief probation officer in Suffolk County, a regional manager for probation services, regional manager for the OCC. And he began his career where I initially met him as a probation officer in juvenile court in Plymouth and Barnstable counties. And last but certainly not least, to his left is Meghan Winston. She is the Chief of Transitional Services Unit in the Massachusetts Parole Board. She has been in the field for over 20 years. She began her career at the Department of Youth Services and the Department of Correction, where she helped to develop the BRAVE unit, which is an emerging adult unit for males who are fathers. So you can see that we have a lot of experience on this panel. And before I get to the first question, I do want to mention some statistics and sort of lay the foundation for why we are here to talk about reentry, spending what is almost an entire afternoon on this. Nationwide in 2019, there were 10.8 million individuals who were released from our nation's prisons and jails, 78% of whom were men. Annually, there's an average of 610,000 individuals who are released to our communities. Clearly, the overwhelming majority are from local and county jails. In Massachusetts, in 2021, there were a little over 1,800 individuals who were released from our state prisons. In terms of recidivism rates, the Bureau of Justice has statistics which show in 2008, it takes a while for them to gather information from all the states. So a lot of the statistics sound like they're dated, and in many respects they are. In 2008, 82% were arrested within 10 years, 62% were reincarcerated. The Sentencing Commission, in talking about federal prisons in 2010, close to 50% were rearrested within 8 years. Probation and parole in 2021, 3.7 million, 2.9 on probation, 800,000 on parole. In terms of recidivism rate within Massachusetts on the state level, the Department of Correction reported a 3-year recidivism rate of 26% for those that were released in 2019, which means 1 out of 4 were re-incarcerated within 3 years. And finally, the houses of correction, it's a little harder to come up with accurate numbers, primarily because there are a number of independent entities. But what I am able to say, and maybe the sheriff can elaborate a little bit, is because people are held for much shorter times and the turnover rate is much higher, it's fair to say that the recidivism rate is probably much higher than the Department of Corrections. So I will stop there and we will get to the questions. And with the first one being asking the panelists to talk about what is being implemented in your specific area and talk a little bit about what kinds of innovation is being done in reentry. We'll start with you, Andy.
How much time do I have?
How about 5 minutes?
Well, it's first of all, I don't know, can folks hear me? Yeah. I have to hold the button down.
Press it one time.
There you go.
And then hold it close to you.
All right, can folks hear me?
Yeah.
All right, excellent. I'm not sure I have enough time to talk about a lot of the initiatives that we have started and undertaken and working on. But I will, as best I can, try to break down kind of what our key emphasis points have been. And the first is really looking at like system level barriers. We create, through legislation, regulations, things like that, tripwires. And we create barriers and obstacles for people to succeed. So we have, a considerable focus on trying to identify what those tripwires are and then trying to eliminate them. The second emphasis point is kind of tied into that, which is a focus on social determinants. Housing, education, employment services, post-release supports, things like that. We can create any type of treatment program, support program, but if someone is at risk of being unhoused, if they have food insecurity issues, they're gonna fit. So creating that foundation where people can actually be successful is really been a critical focus point for us. In terms of our correctional institutions, humanizing, normalizing environments, right? We're really trying to create environments where people can transform, where they have the opportunity to change. And that is, yes, it's done through programming, but it's also done through culture, relational skills, how we interact with people, things like that. A fourth emphasis point has been on relationship building, but we have to connect with our stakeholders. And our stakeholders are the people we serve. So the incarcerated population, impacted people in the community, CPCS, the legislature, the sheriffs, everybody, our communities. So really, we've done, and I say we, but it's been historically, we've done a really good job at building the distrust. And we kind of have to break those barriers down and be able to build trust. So really getting out and engaging all of our stakeholders. And then all of these kind of tie into creating that foundation of success. So looking at like system level things, and I'll just name a few, we were able to eliminate supervision fees across the board for probation and parole legislatively. And when we had the initial conversation, people didn't even know what it was. So when you explain to people what it was, and they're like scratching heads, like, so they have to actually pay to be on supervision? Yeah, well, where does the money go? Back to the general fund. Well, then what happens to it? We don't know, but having. That's an obstacle, and that was an obstacle for a lot of people. If you have a long-term supervision and you add up $65 a month, $80 a month. Obstacle, system level barrier. State ID program. We have worked hard and, we still have work to do on that, but trying to ensure that when people leave our institutions, they have an ID in hand, they have a birth certificate in hand, and they have a social security card. Without those three things, they will fail, or the likelihood of folks failing will increase. And then, getting into some, again, I could probably go on for a while, but, kind of creative housing programs, creating supportive housing models that lead to empowerment, sustainability, supporting people, but that at some point in time, they're able to then, sustain and be able to pay rent or pay their monthly, the lease, so that they can stay housed. So those are some of the generally speaking, like what our emphasis points have been on in the last several years at the executive office.
Great, thank you. Sheriff.
So let me say this at the outset. Corrections, particularly on the county level, because I don't really work with the DOC as intimately. This is no longer your grandfather's carceral facility. And what I mean by that, when we first arrived at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department back in 2002, a lot of, I call them residents, I don't really like the word inmates, but a lot of our residents were there for assault battery, domestic violence, some drug dealing, some bank robbery and that sort of thing. Over time, that complexion changed to where we have a lot of people that have behavioral health and substance use issues, as well as the aforementioned. But those numbers have really ticked up, and it costs a lot to incarcerate an individual on the county level. It's anywhere from $65,000 to $85,000 annually per resident. And I have, as was mentioned, almost 1,200. And so you do the math, that's a lot of money. One of the big things that I always rail about is the fact that we should try to get in front of the curve when you talk about folk that may be remanded to a carceral facility. And I was about to say the criminal justice system, but I also don't use that. I call it the criminal legal system. Because oftentimes, if you don't have the resources, the wherewithal, the finances to get the justice that you think you should, you may not, frankly. But you are, enmeshed in the legal system. I'm sure some of you, maybe all of you, are familiar with Mass and Cass, where we have a number of people basically set up a community inside of a community right outside the door of our department. And what came from that was seeing people every day when we drove to work and when we drove home that was impacted by behavioral health issues or substance use issues. It's just mind-boggling to see people really self-medicating and doing other things right out there in broad daylight. I'm old enough to remember, I'm from New York City, I'm old enough to remember the heroin epidemic. And back then, people would take their medication kind of in a secluded, cloistered area. It wasn't right out in the open. Nowadays, it's right out there for all to see. And so what we did as a department is we went down to DC and we talked to the Department of Justice. And we said to them, look, we need to change how, at least our department, how carceral facilities comport themselves when you talk about housing some of our residents. And they were very open to what we were trying to do. What we were talking about was taking some of our units and solely devoting those units to behavioral health or substance use. So when you come in, you get classified, and once you're classified, that directs where we're gonna put you. You start out in what's called new man, and then you move on from there. But if you are suffering from one of these other maladies, i.e. behavioral health or substance use, you would go directly after classification to one of those units to get the care that's needed. You know, and it's funny, our mandate is care, custody, and control. And when I sit in front of audiences, I like to break those three things down, but I generally start with custody. And I say, if you look up the word custody, there are two definitions. One is imprisonment, the other is guardianship. And I think that if we're gonna be accountable to our fellow man and woman, we really do need to comport ourselves as if we are going to roll up our sleeves and give them the care that they need. And so what the Department of Justice said to us is, look, we're behind you, we'll work with you, we'll help you raise funds for this. But what we suggest is when you get back to the Commonwealth, you team up with one of the major hospitals. So that there could be that continuum of care, as so when folks leave us, they have some place to go. And on average, men are with us for about 12 months, ladies about 6 months on average. You go to, as I'm sure most of you know, a county facility if your sentence is 2.5 years or less. And so we came back, we approached 3 hospitals, Mass General, Tufts, and Boston Medical Center, to tell them what we wanted to do to see if we could get them to partner with us. And it took a long time. Well, 2 of them dropped out almost immediately, Tufts and Mass General. Well, we had ongoing conversations with BMC for quite some time. And earlier this spring, we actually signed an MOU with BMC, wherein now their health care practitioners are actually, some of them are housed at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. And it's an awesome experience to have these really seasoned professionals working with our population to care for them while they're with us and then to continue that care once they leave. And one of the things that I thought that we should do, if we were serious about this, is to write a white paper on the changing nature of carceral facilities. So I approached Brandy University and talked to them about what it is that we're trying to do. And thankfully, they decided that they wanted to be a part of this. And so they're working with us to collect data and do other things as we are going through this process. One of the things that they did last year was they actually used our department as a teaching center for one of their classes. The class was housed mostly online, but right at the Sheriff's Department, to really get that kind of first-hand look at what it is that we do on a day in and day out basis. The reason for the white paper is to really talk about the changing nature of carceral facilities, and with the hope that we get it into one of the leading medical journals, because we really want to bring daylight to the fact that as a society, we can do better, we must do better, and the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, along with my fellow sheriffs, will do better. And I'll stop there, there's other stuff, but I don't want to dominate.
No, thank you. Representative.
Well, wrong button. All right, it's Friday. Thank you for the question. This is a very esteemed panel, and contrary to them, I've only been in government for 4 years. I'm a girl from around the way who wanted to help her community and decided to do it ultimately through elected office. So I've been sitting with the question, Anthony, and I'm struggling with it because how do you actually have innovation in a system that is truly archaic? Full stop. Maybe because I've entered my 4th decade of life, maybe because I'm coming off the heels of an election where we saw how as a Black woman you have to be superhuman to even be taken half that serious. So I have a lot of ducks to give right now. And so I'm really struggling with that question. I can sit here and tell you about all the millions and billions of dollars that we as a Commonwealth invest in programs. I see Roka is in the building. I can sing the praises of Undersecretary Peck and all the things that he has done to try to make our reentry system better. I can talk about Sheriff Tompkins and the work that he does to try to humanize, partnering with NECAT and other organizations for those who are quote unquote hard to employ to have jobs. But at the end of the day, we are truly tinkering around the edges of a system that is not serving us in this day and age. So the question I would have to my panelists and to all of you in the room is, knowing what we know today about our, and I agree, criminal legal system, what could we and should we be doing differently when we come across individuals in our society who are not following our laws, who have been over-policed for whatever reason and are heavily brought into this system, and who may also be dealing with substance abuse and other disorders? Because what I would imagine, if we actually had the time for that conversation, is instead of thinking like, oh, I need more staffing for this, we would say, actually, we might need to have some dormitories, and maybe we need security suites, or maybe we need to have more educational program, maybe we need to have more folks who speak the different languages of the folks that we have coming out of our system. But we don't actually take the time to have that conversation, and I think until we're serious about that, we're gonna find ourselves in this repeated cycle. So I love this panel, I love this work. We give a lot of money, we follow a lot of bills to try to make it better. But at the end of the day, I don't think the system as it is presently set up, based on how it was essentially intentionally designed, is serving us for who we say we are as a society today and where it is we're trying to be. We've often seen from other nations, particularly some European models, of what it looks like for folks who do experience incarceration. And I think there's a lot that we could learn from that. I just don't know, well, I know we don't have the political capital to make it happen, but I guess I'm sending a SOS and waving the banner for all of you with your very, very strong advocacy chops to push us to do better, because right now we're doing good work, but it truly is just tinkering around the edges and not dealing with the heart of the issues.
Did you say you had a lot of money?
For you, Chair.
Commissioner, you have to follow up on that one.
I'm trying to figure out what you did leave. So I'm struggling with a little bit of a voice issue, so if my voice should go low, I'm not having a stroke or heart attack. So I appreciate that. So look, as I'm listening and, as I heard the prior panelists and as I listened to Representative Fluker, I think in probation, we're looking to do a lot of the work and innovation that she's talking about. And I think, there's some priorities that I outlined, but speaking to what you're talking about, one of the things that has been essential for us, not just in probation, but in the trial court. Well, back in 2015, Chief Justice Ralph Gant propagated all of the judges and all of the leadership around the trial court. And one of the things that he was really concerned with was racial and ethnic disparity in our sentencing practices. And he said that we had a problem and we needed to do something about it. And so as a trial court over the last 8, 9, 10 years, we've been really focused on about how we address this issue of sentencing and how it is playing out. And as you talked about, in communities as over police, over surveilled, over arrested, prosecuted, and incarcerated. And so so just give you an example, in 2020 and 2016, the trial court had or the probation service had a staff environment that was only 21% diverse. And we intentionally went about looking at how we address the issue of racial and ethnic disparity, because it is fundamentally important that when people walk into courthouses and they walk into probation offices, they see people that speak their language, that look like them, that reflect it, that have the same lived experiences grew up in many of those communities. So we have moved our probation service from a department that was 21% diverse in 2016 to one that is now 33% diverse. We went from 100% executive leadership staff to one that is now 50% diverse. Where I don't jump up and down and talk, I'm the first Black commissioner in 145 years, but I think it is really important for us. And so we've been really intentional about tackling the perception issue where people walk in the courthouse and they don't see people that look like them. But even more, there are a couple of things that we've been focusing on. And when I became commissioner, a couple of things that were really important for me is we need to get out of the community. We need to go and work and talk and live and see where the folks that we're supervising at. We need to be able to spend time in those communities. Don't bring people to courthouses. For me, the worst condition of probation that exists is report to your probation officer. And we force people to report during the day when they have work issues, they got daycare issues, they got childcare issues, they got other life. And so now part of our job is I want probation officers out in the evening, at night, on weekends, doing the kind of work that is fundamentally important to not disrupting people's lives and drawing them into courthouses. And so part of this is really strengthening our presence in the community. We're doing a lot of work there. Another aspect of the work that we've been doing, and I think in 2018 and 2019, we had Pew Center for the States as well as the Council of State Governments coming, and they look at Massachusetts. And we are ranked #1 in the country for sending the fewest people to prison or jail as a result of a violation process. And as a matter of fact, we have reduced between 2019 and 2023, we reduced violations across the board by 44%. That number is lower. We'll be releasing an annual report over the next couple of weeks that will show the success and the work that we're doing here in this space. So a big part of this is how we continue to drive those down. So me, I mean, I love the sheriff and I love Mr. Peck, but our intent is to close both prisons and jails. Because I think if we, again, no problem, sure, I know you love But a big part of this work is really, you know, the sort of interventions and behavioral health work that we're doing in substance abuse, treatment health, mental health disorder, and all the other work that we're doing in this space. One of the things is we've been around since 1878 as a probation entity. And over the decades, we have just continued to add policy and protocol and practice, and we've done very little revision of that. I have got 45 different experts working within the probation field now, looking at every policy and practice that we have in place. And we're going to revamp those to policies and practices that are meaningful, that are engaging, that are supportive, that really puts the individuals that we work with and supervise first and not the staff. This, look, we work in systems that are really hierarchical in nature. And we need to flip that and think about the person that is sitting on the other side of the counter is the most important, not the judge, not the chief, not the probation officer. And so we're spending a lot of time and money in that space. I've allocated funding to every probation department across the Commonwealth to spend more money, looking to involve not just the individuals that are on probation, but their families, their children, the organizations and institutions that are out there doing a lot of the legwork. You talk about Roka, you talk about UTEC, but then the hundreds of other agencies that are out there that we are looking to partner with, because we know that those are the real experts who can leverage the resources that wherever we have them, that we can share and draw them into this. We think we can do a better job. So I think overall, I think we're headed in the right direction. Your point is well taken. We support and appreciate the support of the legislature in terms of putting funding behind the policy reform from the Justice Reform Act of 2018. I think it's the reason why I'm sitting here as commissioner, because we did a lot of innovative work, but I'll stop there because I think you've got some additional questions on.
Yes, thank you. Meghan, tell us what's going on in Parole.
So I am just finishing up my first year with the Massachusetts Parole Board. And I think that I can collectively say from the executive team and the board members that make up the Parole Board is that there's an agreement to a level with State Rep Oakley in that a lot.
Fluker, sorry, I'm very particular about that.
Fluker, oh, excuse me. That we have, we have created systems and essentially, bastardized them in some ways, right? Like is what the intention that we were put forth to do, is that what we're having success in doing? And I think that in a lot of circles of conversation, it's not that folks are necessarily doing it wrong, but as we change and as we evolve as community and as society, we need to change with that. So some of the things that Parole has kind of taken on is the Massachusetts Parole Orientation Program that has been put on all of the tablets for the incarcerated individuals on the inside, in hopes that we can better prepare folks for parole. There seems to be a kind of a stronghold, right, on whether or not somebody feels like they're good enough to be paroled, right? And we know that a lot of times their like intrinsic sense of self and their character tells them that they're not good enough for anything, right? Which is a lot of the trauma and stuff that has resulted into the life of crime or the incarceration, one might suggest. So in recognizing that, right, we want to make sure that we're meeting folks kind of where they're at. So along with the assistance of EOF, the support of EOF, the Department of Corrections, and the executive team, myself, and some other institutional parole staff, we embarked on putting this kind of program onto all of the tablets. So when the incarcerated individuals are receiving their tablets, they have some layer of understanding on what they need to prepare themselves for a parole hearing, right? I think that has now been rolled out in all of the state facilities, excuse me, across the state at this point, November 4th, I believe that occurred. Another thing that we started to do and recognize is risk needs responsivity. So we partnered with UMass for Health under the assistance and support of EOPS. And really working to drill down and take a look at our risk needs assessment, and are we correlating the risk need with what the disposition of requirements for structured supervision might look like, right? So if somebody, is taking a look at their likelihood to recidivate when they return, are we matching the response and the risk need component with their supervision outcome when they return to community? And I think that a lot of work drilling down to the point that the other panelists have said too, is are we meeting people where they're at? Are we taking a look at the relationship and what the individual actually really needs to be supported and to be successful in the community? We've heard a lot about the MOU that is engaged with state IDs, social security cards, vital records, birth certificates. Those are critical components that you don't want to send somebody out back into community that they don't have those kind of identification pieces of one, who they are, right? And two, what are their priorities when they return? I think that as a parole board, we have been around since the 1800s as well. And it's time to evolve, right? It's time to change with the times. It's time to take a look at if we had 3,100 hearings in 2023, and 2,000 of them were positive. How do we continually increase that each year and as we move forward? Terminations and clemencies are big kind of pieces that the board has really started to take a look at, and really start to drill down on the expectations and the positive outcomes that come along with returning folks to community. Not to close all of the prisons and houses of corrections per se right away, but would be out of the job. But there are a lot of states, and we're taking a look at what other states are doing. Louisiana, I think, was one of the most recent to have done away with discretionary parole altogether, and it's a mandatory parole, right? Like everybody gets it. It's a right. It's not like a subjective kind of opportunity, if you will. So I definitely think there's still a lot more work to be done, but I think that we're on the right track. I think that having panels like this, I think being in collegiate environments like this and speaking to folks who are going to be coming up the ranks and engaging with these particular individuals, I think is going to be critical for us as we move forward. And I really hope to continue to collaborate with the Department of Corrections, as we have more recently with UMass and some other community providers, to continue to assist us in really taking a look at the work that we've done in the past and how we can kind of right the wrongs moving forward.
Great, thank you. It's a really nice opening. One thing I noticed, and having been around this work for quite some time, and this is a positive change, is almost all of you talked about what is happening from the perspective of treating individuals in a sense as customers. They're your customers, and it's your duty in your different roles to try and accomplish as much as you can for their benefit. And I think it's fair to say that's something that wasn't the case a number of years ago. So that certainly is a positive. I want to follow up, and I'll open this up to whoever wants to answer it. And some of this was touched upon, but what do you do about individuals who are struggling to succeed once they are outside the walls? You think about housing, people who aren't getting released from a facility are having trouble finding affordable housing. You mentioned, some of you mentioned substance use disorder, mental health issues, trauma, helping them find employment, lack because of a lack of education. Sheriff, you're doing some things around healthcare, which is great. Family dynamics, in this instance, I'm talking about negative family dynamics, negative dynamics with respect to maybe the neighborhood that they come from. What kinds of things are you doing to help them succeed, to overcome? That's a lot, but what kinds of strategies do you have? Sheriff.
So about 5 or 6 years ago, I began a program called Family Matters. And what we do is we work with a percentage of our population that comes from either the most chaotic or dysfunctional households. And what we've asked the individual that's with us and their families, if we can serve as like a kind of connective tissue. And what I mean by that is we've had people say to us that they will approach state or city agency or whoever and don't get the services, don't get the response that they think that they should get. And so what we wanted to do was to, as we were working to help an individual get back up on his or her feet, we didn't want to send them back into kind of a dysfunctional, chaotic environment. And what we found with talking with the families is a lot of families really don't know a lot of the social service agencies out there or how to access them. And so, or they've had trouble connecting with them. And so the families have to give us written permission because they're not under our jurisdiction to work with them. But then we act as an intermediary between them and several of the agencies, particularly those where they've had a hard time or harder way to go with that agency. Agency that may not have treated them as well as they thought they should be treated, an agency that may not have returned their telephone call. Well, I'll tell you what, they're gonna return the sheriff's department's telephone call. And if they don't, then one of my caseworkers go down and we talk about how can we best help this family with whatever the situation is so that they can get the services that they need. And the program has worked pretty darn well for us, so much so that as people that are not incarcerated have heard about it, have asked if we could do that with their families, to which we said no, but that's the kind of thing that we have to do, I believe, is to work with the families and the individual. It's gotta be a holistic approach. You know, we can't just walk a person to the door after they serve their time and say, good luck, you know, good luck. The recidivism rate here is about 46%. And so we know today, 30 to 50% of the people that we release may well be back with us in 3 to 6 months. We know that, it's not a guesstimate, that's kind of a fact there, you know? And so we have to work with individuals a lot differently. So that's just one of the things, Anthony, that we do is to really give that holistic approach. And as Undersecretary Peck mentioned about the 3 things that they're looking at, the 3 things that we're looking at is in the absence of housing, healthcare, and employment, chances are they may be recidivate, particularly in that first 72 hours after release, if they kind of reteam with the old gang, so to speak, they're coming back. So we have to look at the family here as well.
What about probation, parole, when your staff are on the ground working with people who are trying to succeed and they are faced with any number of these barriers that we mentioned and more? What types of strategies do you take?
So we've got, you know, I think a multi-part approach on how we approach this and on any, so if you look at the last quarter of fiscal 2023, we were funding short-term housing 3 months to 6 month range of somewhere between 500 and 600 individuals on a monthly basis. And this funding isn't just provided to individuals on probation, that somebody's it's a shared resource for all of the parties here at the table. So if you're on probation or parole, if you're released from the DOC or we are funding on a monthly basis in short-term housing somewhere between 3 and 6 months. We also funding housing, you know, sober houses. There's 155 sober houses around the state certified through MASH. We also, you know, we're providing funding assistance. When you think of the first quarter of this year, we're funding anywhere somewhere between 400 and 500 individuals as well in short-term housing. So we get this issue of housing and the role that that plays. But then the other aspects of this, the behavioral health and the mental health aspects of this, we've partnered with any number of agencies. I think is CRJ here today? No. You know, but we have going back to housing.
Community resources.
Apologize. But we've contracted it in 5 different locations where we're providing, you know, funding for housing. Our behavioral health initiatives, we have worked with Mass Health. We have got close to 20 individuals who are child court employees or vendors that we've had in our community justice support centers, where they're called certified application counselors. It's a complex test put on with Mass Health. And we are now enrolling individuals right into Mass Health at almost all of our child court locations. This isn't, you know, the sheriff just mentioned that this isn't your grandfather's system. This isn't your grandparents' child court either. And part of this is we believe that it is fundamentally important. We know that if we have individuals who are struggling with health issues, struggling with mental health, in a state where insurance is supposed to be free, we've got courthouse locations where as many as 55% of individuals aren't enrolled in any health insurance coverage. So we're enrolling individuals right now. We've had more than close to 1,000 referred to enrolled. We've worked with more than 875. We've enrolled more than 300 right into health insurance. So we've got employees who are helping people select health insurance plans. And this isn't something that you normally would expect from a trial court or probation system. So we're doing a lot of work in a lot of spaces to change sort of not only the conversation, but the real impact that we have on that front line within the system.
So when an incarcerated person is preparing to transition, the institutional parole officer is ensuring that they do have their mass health set up prior to going. That's the goal of it, right? Sometimes on those house of correction individuals, the sentence is very short, or they come in and they have the jail credits and they're almost immediately eligible. And then in those cases, it's a bit of a downward slope for us to be able to get the mass health generated by then. So luckily, the partnership with probation and the work that they do is just amazing. We're very thankful for that. Out of the individuals who were paroled to supervision in 2023, about 38% of them had conditions in their home plans were MASH certified locations. That kind of speaks to the level of reintegration kind of efforts and acknowledgement with substance use disorders and or related mental health type issues that we're seeing upon release. We want to increase that, right? And we want to start to really take a look and hone in on the efforts to ensuring their sobriety when they get out. And a lot of schools have thought relapse is a part of recovery, and so we want to be super mindful of that. We have Chief Gomez here in the audience. He is the chief of the field services, and he has done incredible work with his team to ensure that they're meeting folks where they're at out in the community. If there is an incident, they're not going to be coming back into custody because they popped positive or something, right? It's sitting down, having a conversation, ensuring that there's a navigator who is in every regional office across the state, kind of another assistant, if you will, to their success and their productivity in the community. They're going to look for a rehab location. They're going to look for a detox. They're going to give them multiple chances, right? Until it becomes that public safety kind of component for that individual. They're really starting to take a look at setting conditions with alcohol and substance abuse, substance use or abstinence, if you will. That's been a big topic of conversation with our legislatures, right-sizing condition setting. So I think when we talk about substance abuse, mental health, partnering with BHJI, partnering with CRJ locations upon release, the MASH locations. But the truth of the matter is that we need more assistance with beds. We need more assistance for long-term residential treatment programs. We need more help with dual diagnostic beds. We need a lot more partnership and better outcomes with DMH and DDS. We have a lot of individuals who do meet those mental health kind of criterias, right? And we understand that there are budget constraints from every level of funding, but if we really truly want to have that success, we need to figure out ways to better get in the same room and develop policies and have a conversation about what our realities are, not necessarily our barriers. Because being able to do an intake for an incarcerated individual to determine whether or not they are eligible for DDS services, that really doesn't track for us. But we understand the stopgaps that agency has as well. Long-term residential treatment program, dual diagnostic programs, those are the bed areas that if we have any funders in the room. Let's have a conversation after.
Thank you. Can you both talk a little bit, for those who may not be as familiar with probation and parole, how do you prioritize those who you are serving and determine this individual needs a lot greater attention, a lot greater care, versus those who, through your however you assess it, they don't need as much attention and they're probably going to be in better shape? How do you decide to prioritize your resources?
We have the LSCMI, it's a risk needs assessment, right? And the institutional parole officer will go through that risk needs assessment with every individual in preparing their case for the parole board for their hearing. And then after that, there's a case summary that's compiled by the institutional probation officer, and they will debrief what those need areas might be for that individual, so that when they're going before the board, there's a better understanding of what the conditions might need to support that individual's return to community. We're also working very closely with the mental health care provider and a clinical team at the Department of Corrections, and having a conversation about where they are with their mental health, kind of whether it be a cognitive piece or you know, an ADA type of piece. We're reaching out to General Counsel, who's working with CPCS, to get some representation on that front as well. I think that the home support piece is really kind of critical, is what we're identifying. Do they have a home support? Do they have support in the community? What's wraparound services? Have we set them up in the community? And really, I mean, everybody needs a little bit when they get out. That's just the reality of it, not to overburden them or to agency dump on them. Because I think a lot of them are probably agency exhausted at that point, but just to say, hey, we're here, we're gonna be a support for you if you need it. But the ones that truly need a little bit more, then the supervision, the field supervision kind of component is heightened.
Great, thank you.
Look, so we use the Ohio Risk Assessment System. And we also use something called the OYAS, which is the Ohio Youth Offender System for Juveniles. And so there are two different assessments, one focused on adults, one focused on juveniles. They've been both validated to be used in Massachusetts through, but one of the things that is really important when we're thinking about those instruments, and we know that nationally there's been a lot of concern about the racial and ethnic disparity that plays out across assessment instruments. And so we've approached this in a number of ways. We've made sure that we've trained every, not just probation, not every probation, but significant amount of child court was, but every probation officer in the Commonwealth has spent the last 2.5 years undergoing training around understanding racial and ethnic disparities, so that when we're conducting this assessment, we're looking for those factors that may have brought, when we're thinking about how people are policed, surveilled, arrested, and charged, we are also looking to try to understand those factors to determine how we approach our supervision. So a lot of this is also based on the nature of the offense, the type of offense. Then we're looking, and so we're looking at those risk factors, but we're also looking at the needs of these individuals. So substance abuse, mental health, housing, employment. And so we're all looking at, we take a very holistic approach to how we design not only the supervision, how we address those needs. And so I think it is really targeted, and it is all based on individual needs. I mean, we know that assessments are really good at predicting the general behavior of a group, not necessarily specific individuals. So it is important about how we approach individuals. Now, the other big part of this is hiring. You know, 20, 30 years ago, if you looked at probation officers, and this isn't a knock against police, so don't take this wrong, but we used to hire a lot of individuals who were law enforcement driven, who were into surveillance and that. You know, but then many of them who couldn't run a mile and a half, that's the joke. So they became probation officers. We don't hire that individual anymore. We're hiring people with treatment, educational, health, behavioral backgrounds, and we've changed the dynamic of who we hire. And I think that is translated, as we mentioned, into, you know, less violations, more supports. Again, the legislature, they really funding matching policy with practice and supporting all of the reforms. And so we bring all of those tools to bear about how we work. But I also think, as you hear, we're talking to each other. We're working with each other. I mean, up until last week, me and Andy are always on the phone. You know, we met with the sheriff. We meet all the time. We just met with parole. And so we're talking about how we can improve systems across the board. And 20 years ago, we hardly talked to each other. We were all very territorial. And those days have disappeared. And I think from justice reform and the practice and what we're looking to over, the kind of outcomes that we're seeking, and we know at the end of the day, we're in the customer service business. How we treat people, how we engage. You know, we spend a lot of time talking about empathy and understanding, and for me, empathy isn't something you talk about. It is how you do and how you perform the work. And I think, for me as commissioner, that is job number one. And, you know, we have embarked on a really Look, I mean, this is personal for me. I could have been on the other side of the spectrum. I know what it is to be the victim of violence. I know what it is to be the victim of sexual assault. I know all of these things. So I know that on any given day, the only thing that separates me from the guys or the women or anybody, regardless of how people self-identify, is that there was somebody in my life who made a difference, who took the time to talk, to engage, to support, to give me a second chance. So we're in second chance business. And I bring that fundamentally to all of the work that we do with myself and my team.
And Anthony, as a footnote, we have had parole working out of the sheriff's department for quite some time. And now, in talking to the commissioner, we also have probation now that are working there. So as guys and ladies are about to cycle down, they can meet with folk on that side of the equation so that they can get whatever program planning in place that they're going to have to adhere to. Get that done while they're still with us. So when they walk out the door, they've got a plan, they've got a strategy. And along with what the commissioner said, we have about 2 or 3 academies, cadet academies a year. And about 3, 4, 5 years ago, we actively began to recruit people with a sociology, psychology background, a social work background, because we wanted the officers to have a better understanding of the individuals that they were working with that are on the units. It's great to have, folk coming out of the military, that's a fine thing, but we really wanted to really talk about the science of care. And so having those individuals come to work for us is also been very illuminating and very helpful.
That is great to hear. I remember there were some of us in the room who were around when we were, the study was being done in Massachusetts around, that led to criminal justice reform. And one of the big issues was the complete lack, maybe not complete, but the lack of enough cooperation, communication. One side didn't know what the other side was doing. It seems like that has changed dramatically. So kudos to all of you who've been a part of that. Here's a question, I think, for the Undersecretary. We've talked about all the different barriers that people face when they're getting out. Massachusetts has done very well at decreasing the number of people who are incarcerated in state prisons. But we're near the top in terms of how long people are incarcerated. What types of things are being done to assist people with skills to succeed in the modern world? And I'm thinking of things like technology, cell phones, social media. I mean, you so many places now you can't even use cash. What types of things are being done, if anything, to sort of give people a heads up so when they come out, they have a little bit of a sense of how much things have changed?
If I could start a little high level, in the last 5 years, the department has closed 5 correctional facilities. Since 2015, the sentence population has gone down by 60%. And that is a direct result of basically this right here. That's thoughtful legislation. It's thoughtful sentencing. It's our law enforcement communities who don't get enough credit, who I work with on a daily basis and see them in the communities and how they engage people and how they problem solve. And it's also a part of how the department and probation and parole has shifted, and there has been a shift over the last number of years to really focus on those social determinants, education, treatment, programming, and support. I'm not going to sit here and say that we don't have work to do. We have work to do, but that has really what has created, these reductions. And so it's kind of a universal, collective, collaborative approach to this. I will also say this, and I'm kind of going off a little bit, but there are, if you look at how we fund, and this goes back to the reps, kind of questions about systems and things like that. people wind up in the correctional or even criminal justice system as a whole because of all these other systems that have in some way failed these people. And then there's this belief that, well, the criminal justice system will fix them. That a correctional system will fix them, that probation and parole will correct these problems. And these are systems on the criminal justice side that really aren't designed to do that. I'm not, relegating responsibility, I'm not minimizing responsibility. We have a responsibility to address those things. My bigger point is that it's going to take all of these systems and not just public safety, not just the sheriff, probation, parole, courts. This is a societal problem. So working collectively together is the only way we're going to fix, and address these problems, especially, the mental health problem, the substance abuse problem, that we're plagued with. If you look at, and I talked about earlier, like humanizing and normalizing. What does that mean? And sometimes when I say that, people, they get confused with normalizing, right? And they'll say, well, you're normalizing culture. Like, no. Normalizing the best we can, the correctional environment, to the environment in the community. And how do we do that? We have taken steps through training, right? We've changed some training practices, instituted for correctional practices. Relationship building, how do you communicate with people? We have spent $25 million on a tablet program. And along with that tablet program is a learning management platform. And then the licensing that goes with that. How do people learn today? Most people learn in an online format. Normalized. So we're giving people the opportunities at all hours of the day to learn through programming, all types of education classes. I stand to be corrected on the number last year, probably 275,000 hours of program on a tablet, because that's how people learn. That's how you can't do anything today without technology. I'm as ignorant as it comes with technology. It's a good thing that I have good support people around, because I can use email about it. But think about, folks who have just spent 20, 25 years in prison and they're getting out and you need this. By the way, if you want to do banking, it's right here. By the way, I don't bank on my phone. I don't know how to do it. I screw it up. So that's just one example. And by the way, that's if you want to look at it from a security perspective, we've been taking some hits recently. That 200 and again, I stand to be corrected on the exact number, but that's 265,000 hours where people are not playing. They're occupied. You look at it from a safety perspective, they're occupied. Put aside, the actual benefit of participating in the program. We have, the DOC 4 years ago started the Brave unit. It's an emerging adult unit for young folks 18 to 25. They incorporated a parenting piece to that we kind of peeled away the numbers, realized a lot of those that kids, I call them kids, but in that age bracket were parents. So we kind of added this, they added a kind of a twist to it, where there's a very big focus on parenting, got a federal grant around it. And if you walk into one of these units, and I was there, I think it was in May with a national researcher, a guy who had done a lot of work in probation, parole, corrections. And we went in there and 4 hours later, the superintendent said, "You guys don't leave, I'm turning off the lights, get out." And when we left, the particular individual looked at me and said, "I've been in over 400 correctional facilities across this country. And I've never been in a facility or in a housing unit where there wasn't a correctional officer in sight." So it's a restorative based program. There's mentors in there, it's focused on education, it's focused on treatment. It's focused on this, dehumanizing. And building people up and empowering people, teaching them parenting skills. They have a phenomenal program where, you know, if you walked into the particular visiting room, which the program actually moved because we closed Concord, but you would walk into this visiting room and it was like you were in like a nursery somewhere else, you know, like a daycare or something like that. So that's one way. There's, you know, the preparation that folks now go through to be released, with focusing on those social determinants, the IDs, the birth certificates. We have a very creative housing program, which is the money lives with housing in livable communities. But I bet none of you would ever believe that as of today, the Department of Corrections funds 25 housing vouchers. Like a Section 8 certificate. Quarterly, all you have to do is meet the income requirement. And those people are using those in the communities, and that's how they pay their rent. And building supports around that. We have a credible messenger program, small. We were hoping to expand budget related stuff, but we have 7 people who are what we call credible messengers, and they're people who have been formerly incarcerated. They go inside 3 facilities, the voluntary program, and they go in and basically build relationships and say, we're here to help you. You don't have to do it. It's not compulsory, but we're here. And there's that immediate connection, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that the 5 of us can talk about, but there are just some people that I will never be able to connect with or reach with because of experiences, right? In life. And these folks have a really unique advantage in that, where they can go into what they need to. Just think about the connection with that. Voluntary program, they've had over, I think, 7,000 in the last 3 years, where they've actually had met with people. They've had roughly 700 folks have actually said, yeah, you know what, I want to do. And it's voluntary, so there is a drop off, right? Folks might use the credible messengers for transportation. When they get out the day of release, they can ride. Credible messengers will drive them wherever they need to go. You know, there is a you know, kind of that disengagement in about 60 to 90 days, but it's on their terms, completely voluntary. Did I get off track? I think I missed.
A little bit. That was very helpful.
I have a habit.
Well, let me switch.
Before you do it, and I think that everything the Undersecretary said is right on point. But let me give you the kind of a little bit of a different look at that when we talk about program. And with all respect to my sister in government, and I see some of the Eldridges here. How are you, sir? My brother in government and legislators. What has happened to the county sheriffs is a change in the monies that are being allotted to us. And what I mean by that is this. There's a movement, or that actually happened, to have free phone calls for the residents that are housed in our facilities. That's a great thing. But I don't get free phone calls. And I'm not sure you get free phone calls. But our residents do get free phone calls, and that's great. Because that was pulling on grandma or mom. Canteen. The legislators have taken our canteen money along with our phone money. And for my department, that totals $1.6 million annually. And that money went to program. Now, we have the tablets that the Undersecretary mentioned, and those are awesome, those are great. But when you take $1.6 million away from one of our facilities, that really hurts big time. Because the idle mind is the devil's playground. And folk need to be in the program. We can't make this mandatory, we can't make the programs. But we offer a wide array of programs of interest for them. And a lot of them take advantage of that, which is a great thing. But our fear here is that if more money is cut out of our budgets, when something happens, two guys or two ladies or whatever get into a squad where somebody gets hurt, the sheriffs don't want to be looked at as if we weren't doing our job and we weren't patrolling those units the way that we do. And so I bring this up just to say that we need those funds back. Now, some of us have created 501c3s and we've done other things that can bring in additional avenues of revenue. But we also have to be careful with retaining the accounts. Because some of these things, the state could also take that also if they wanted to. And so we really need to be conscious and cognizant of the fact that we work at some serious fiscal limitations. We get level funded to 2 or 3 years back. We don't get level funded to last year, we get level funded to maybe 2018, 2019, 2020. And then we have to come back up to the State House to ask for a supplemental appropriation. And those have been granted. But then they say, oh, why do you sheriffs keep coming back and asking for money? Well, if you gave us our damn money up front and let us spend it the way that we need to spend it, we're responsible people and wouldn't have to come back. And it really is a pain in the backside to have to do that. I just want to go on record as saying that a lot of all the stuff that we're talking about is good, but there's always the yin with the yang, you know, and if we're gonna sit in front of people here, they need to see both sides of the coin.
No,
I'm sorry, Anthony, thank you, because I gotta call a spade, and I gotta call BS when it's BS respectfully, my counterpart, the sheriff, who I fight with all the time, publicly and privately, so it's not you. Between the two of us.
Yeah, if you're gonna say what I just said, yes, yeah, I would hear this.
Okay,
It's not
well,
yes.
no, let me tell you why it is,
Yeah.
because first of all, under Governor Baker, when we tried to get free phone calls, the predominant law enforcement said, we can't do it because we don't have funding. So 3 flipping budget cycles, we had to find the funding to put it back in program before it was authorized. So if you're telling me you don't have those dollars, let's sit down and look at your budget and see where the dollars we had to find, because otherwise it would have been passed over a year and a half ago. I am not kidding you. I am not kidding you. Senator Eldridge is here. I am not kidding you.
Who's here?
Well, then, don't sit up here.
I'm sitting here, in front of all these people.
Well, then we can, then let's sit down and look at the budget. Then that's all I'm saying, because I'm telling you what's happening with legislation.
Stop interrupting her and let her talk.
I'm sorry.
What? I'm sorry?
We would like to hear her talk. It'd be great if you don't interrupt.
That's great, you're right, I apologize,
Thank you.
I apologize, but don't sit here and say that what I'm saying is BS, because it's not.
Again.
But you're right, you're right, you're right,
And
you're
I
right.
sat quietly while you said you had for
I
that.
said she's right. I'll wait till you're done, and then I will refute that.
You've already repeated it and
I'm
I'm
gonna do
done.
that.
Well, do it again, fix your ego.
I can.
I think what we could all agree on is if we're going to bring people into the system and arrest them, then it costs money with all of the things that everybody here has been talking. Clearly, it's a system that involves a lot of money. Without knowing the details about this specific issue. I do want to thank you, Sheriff, for taking a moment to introduce Sheriff Jamie Eldridge, who is up in the back of the room. He is Senator, what I said, Sheriff. Senator Eldridge, who is a longtime judiciary chair, so someone who is very familiar with the issues that we're here talking about. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about how we measure success. I threw out some statistics earlier, and depending upon whether you're talking about the federal government, the state government, local government, or depending upon the particular organization that's keeping the particular data, everyone measures success in a different way. Can you talk about, members of the panel, can you talk about how you think about success? Is it rearrest? Is it not getting rearrested? Is it not getting reincarcerated, or is it some other metric?
I mean, I have a few thoughts on that, I don't know, Pamerson or Meghan has some thoughts, but.
So like, I mean, for us, you know, success in the probation world, it really speaks to, you know, I mean, we can look at recidivism or we can look at rearrest, but for me, this is about people who, one, complete their conditions of probation successfully. People who have gone through, whether it's treatment, programming. We know that violations is one way that is sort of an easy way to look at, you know, success. And I mentioned that you had a violation reduction rate over the last 3 years of 4%, but it goes beyond that. It goes about our ability to connect with people, find them the kinds of treatment and services that are important to changing the trajectory of their lives. I also think it is about our ability to, you know, not just work. Look, I mean, when we think about probation and the population that we're talking about, you know, we've got about 56,000 people that we're working with in probation in Massachusetts. And one of the things that is hard to really understand is about 10,000 parent protection cases. There's about another 8,900 cases of CHINs or CRAs. And so we know that a significant portion of those people that we work as adults came through that system. And so for me, success is our ability to intervene at the juvenile level and follow that trajectory right up through. So I think the more work that we can do, the better, the more effective we are at really working with children and families is an important part of this. But I think, you know, we need to continue to build that better data. And I've got two folks here with me, Brian Marcelo, who's our deputy for the field services, and Mike Waller, who's dealing with our programs. And both of those folks are tasked with looking at our ability to deliver the right kinds of services and programs around the Commonwealth. And so I think, you know, one of the things that I didn't mention, you know, the issue of emerging adults has become central to a lot of the conversation in terms of raised age. We've just brought on a statewide adult manager for emerging adults, statewide manager, because we want to have better uniformity. So I think success is all of those things, our ability to really improve the outcomes of people. So the data may tell one story, but I think our ability to connect and work effectively with people up and down the street is how we measure success at different points.
Thank you for saying that. It's definitely the unprecedented thing where you're gonna get the data as to how many people went back to jail, how many didn't. We can't measure the success like that when people have gone from point A to point B. We don't see that, and for whatever reason in our society, if you can't press a key, I'm a retired Boston police officer. And for the longest time, I worked in prevention, intervention, and retention. And the programs that I administered, they weren't by the department standard success, because I could press a key and say X amount of guns was taken off the street, or X amount of offenders or DVs or domestic violence, you know, and that is so sad because we are human beings, we are not machines. So thank you for saying that.
I'll just jump in and say real quick that in 2023, there was a 76% successful completion rate of those that were out on parole. And I think that, to your point, ma'am, I think that, yeah, that's a great number and all, right? But how do people feel about it, right? And what was their commitment to themselves, their family, and their community at the end of that? I mean, it may be anecdotal, of course, right? But how do we get to how people are feeling about themselves? So that's really intrinsically what's going to change what we're doing, how we're perceived, how we function, how we see ourselves, right? And reducing that kind of causation of harm, if you will. So I'm not quite sure how we will measure it. A couple of thoughts and conversations that we're having, you know, at the parole board is sending a survey out to some of those folks that have completed, right? Like, how do you feel about yourself now? How did you feel about your process? How did you feel about the system, right? How did you feel about your interaction with the agency that you just completed with? And then how do we get better at it? We can sit here as a group, right, and to the Undersecretary's point, and talk about our lived experience and our life's experience, but if we haven't gone through kind of the steps of what we're trying to change, how do we really know that we're impacting and affecting that change? I just want to give a quick shout out to the Credible Messengers. They're just an unbelievable group of people who go in and meet with the incarcerated individuals a couple months before their release and really try and walk them through what that's going to look like and some of those barriers and realities, if you will, that they're going to face as part of transition. And they just do incredible work. But you know, 76%, that's something to hang your hat on, of course. That does not take anything away from the field supervisors and the field parole officers that work so closely with the individuals. But how do they feel about themselves and how do they view the system that they came out of, right? And what are their visions of change? I think it's kind of maybe time to hear from some of them too. And I'm excited to hear about one of the panelist members that's up next.
So okay, I in the last 6 or 7 years ago, in my work, it has triggered a lot of like reflection, a lot of things that folks are talking about, really generating kind of a lot of thought and really kind of challenging my own conventional wisdom. And one of those areas is how do we define success? And I struggled with that personally, professionally. Somewhere along the line, and you know, if you want a quick history lesson, former probation employee, I worked with Pamerson and Deputy Commissioner Marisol and Coelho, and you know, 180 years ago, the father of probation.
I'm not that old.
Probation was started here, and if you look at what the foundation of what his work was, he walked into a court, you know, back 180 years ago with all the blue laws, and they were locking people up who had a drinking problem. And that problem still exists today, but it was based on support. And he said, no, jail's not gonna fix this guy, give him to me, I'll work with him, I'll employ him, you know, things like that. It was based on support, and somewhere along the line, the dial shifted. And I don't know where it is, but that form of supervision, support or whatever turned into surveillance, detection, and then a punitive response. So we are probably the only system that measures success by a failure rate. And our goal is to reduce failure. I mean, think about it for a second. And what other, you know, private company in the private sector measures their productivity by failure? They don't. So there are so many ways, and we create these ways for people to fail. There's probably 100 ways people can fail on supervision. And when they do, boom, you issue them a notice of violation, and there's some sort of a punitive response to that. But we only give them one way to succeed. And you gotta be perfect in order to succeed. And it's for a group of people who probably have a number of deficiencies already, who probably just spent X number of years in prison. But if they do one thing wrong, there's an immediate punitive response. I will use myself as an example. I use this quite frequently. When I was in college, my goal was to probably drink as much as I could and have as much fun as I could, okay? And just have fun. And if I got a C, I was good, I passed, right? My mom wasn't gonna give me a hard time. I was an average student. Yet for some reason, you know, by the grace of God, here I sit. And I'm not perfect, and the people that we work with are not perfect, so we have to kind of reframe what success is. So, you know, if someone is who you know might be on supervision, who has been able, you know, an issue with substance use their entire life, but the second you put them on some sort of supervision, you can't use. It's impossible. They're going to fail. Yet when they do, we lock them back up. We have to reframe that. That will require a balance Because we have to find that balance between the right amount of accountability. Because we can't, there has to be accountability, we gotta find that sweet spot. And that's kind of the key. We haven't figured out yet, so I don't know when we're gonna figure it out, but that's the kind of the key to success. So if someone, that individual who, again, has been, you know, had a lifelong substance use problem and they're sober for 9 months and they fail, the focus should be on, they did it for 9 months. That's a win. Let's make it 18 months, let's make it 12 months. But the balance is the kind of the accountability and the public safety piece to that, so. Bigger, that's, you know, we're not gonna solve that problem today, we haven't solved it yet, but like reframing kind of like what the definition of success is.
So I'm guessing we have a lot of questions out there, so I'm gonna give each panel member a couple of minutes to wrap up, and as you do, keep in mind that you have people here who are interested in, I think, helping you all to effectuate the vision you have for dramatically moving this system in a different direction. So maybe you want to address what can they do to help help you all get where you want the system to be. So we'll start at the end and work back this way since the Undersecretary just spoke.
Appreciate that.
I'm sorry, are they gonna be able to ask their questions or no?
Yes, oh yes.
I think one of the biggest things is to just give each other and give agencies a moment of grace, right? Nobody's perfect. Nobody does the right thing every time. Bad decisions don't necessarily make bad people, right? We have to find ways to continue to build relationships that are gonna benefit the greater good. The collaboration more recently with the Department of Corrections, with probation, with a lot of the sheriff's departments, including Sheriff Tompkins. Those are the pieces, that's the relationship, that's the modeling the way, if you will, that we're looking to develop and we're looking to translate with the incarcerated individuals that we're working with. A lot of wrong has been done, right? And we're not saying that anybody in the past necessarily in the profession has done anything wrong. It's just different now. We're moving in a different direction, we're in a different time. So we have to give those folks and each other the moment of grace when they have moments that maybe don't look so pretty, if you will, right? Meeting people where they're at, understanding that life, the perception of the lifestyle that we have isn't what it needs to be for everybody. It's not a one size fits all. Giving each other a moment of grace, both personally, professionally, with agencies. And offering a helpful opinion, right? So there's gonna be wrong things that are done out of, you know, someone is gonna think that they're making the right decision or moving in the right direction. Maybe they haven't just thought about another perspective. Feel free to offer that perspective, right? Because it takes a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds to develop something really great. If everybody looked the same, if everybody had the same opinion, same ideas, same ideals, you're not gonna get much done, right? So when you go out into whatever entity it is that you're working with, if you have the ability to hire people that think and look nothing like you. Right? That's how you will effectuate change in whatever area it is that you're looking to deal with. And of course, give those folks a moment of grace.
Thank you. So I'm gonna change the rules here. I apologize.
Sorry.
No, I'm being told there's a lot of people who want to ask questions, but you can do 30 seconds. That would be really great.
That's not fair.
Still, yeah.
Look, I think for us, you know, within the probation, I think the collaboration is an important part of this, but I think we need as an organization, you know, we need as entities to put the folks that we work with first. And I do want to continue to thank the legislature, not because they're here, but I think a lot of the reform and a lot of the success we've had is the fact that we've had the kind of funding and resources to do that. So I want to give a shout out to UMass. We've been working with them and our community justice support centers and creating community advisory boards with individuals with lived experiences who we pay stipends to be able to advise us about how to better do this work. We are in the process of promulgating new conditions of probation. We reduced probation conditions from 22 to 16, so significantly less reasons for people to be violated. And I think you would like that over CPCS. You know, and the other part that I'm looking to press as we move forward and we really want to reward people for doing well on conditions of probation. So if you have been on probation for 6 months and you've got a year and you've done well for 6 months, we should think about how we shorten that. So those are sort of some of the things we're thinking.
Thanks, Commissioner.
That's 32 seconds.
Thank you.
I would just add to, in addition to seeing diversity of thought and perspective, like really know what the other side is saying and what their beliefs are. But I think it's also critically important to truly be true to who you are and what your strengths are in advocacy. So first of all, don't think that you can solve everything as it relates to the criminal legal system. Having been a public defender, yes, I filed a few bills, but my primary bill that I've been working on with many in this room is around making sure folks have ID when they come home, because I feel like that's like a sweet spot that I can really focus my energies. I can't do everything and spread myself thin, and neither can you. And then I'd also say, not everyone's gonna be the person who grabs the microphone and is out there front and loud. Some of y'all will be making the sandwiches for the rally, some of y'all will be making the flyers, some of you will be making the phone calls and text messages to make sure people turn out. So just know that advocacy doesn't look one way. You can use whatever your strengths are and where you feel most comfortable to support the larger cause.
Thank you. Sure.
So let me open up my final response by saying this. I want you all to know that I have worlds of respect for the representative sitting next to me. We don't always see eye to eye on the issues of importance. And just like any family, we're gonna have our points of difference, and we're gonna come back on that. It's not malicious or nasty, any of that sort of stuff. It's just hammering home a point. That's what I was doing, and I believe that's what she was doing. So I do apologize to her for speaking over her while she was talking. But I don't apologize for where I stand on this particular issue. That said, my charge to the folk that are sitting in front of us is this. Keep us accountable. Keep coming at us. Keep talking to us about what you see as the jobs that we do and how well or not we are effectuating those jobs. Because I think that's important to hear from the public. I mean, at the end of the day, your tax dollars pay our salaries. Your tax dollars keep our facilities open and thriving. And it can't be done as a once a week or once a month. We need to hear from folks consistently, because we are in the business of saving human lives. And I will close by saying this. One of the things that I like to say is that if we can strengthen an individual, it is our desire that that individual can then take that strength back to their family and strengthen their family. And if that family, or as that family gets stronger, that community around them hopefully gets stronger. So that's what we do as public service each and every day. And we're gonna love on each other, and we're gonna be combative with each other, but at the end of the day, it's the work that is of paramount importance.
Thank you, Sheriff. Undersecretary, you have 5 seconds.
Exactly.
I apologize.
The Celtics is doing really well.
Thank you.
I will just say this, keep an open mind. There's lots of work to be done, and again, I said it before, I will never ever mitigate that. But that work, there's layers to that work, and I think some folks lose sight of that. And we have a better, we have to do a better job, but we can do it better if we do it together.
Great, thank you.
We
Okay,
have-
so we really need some questions now
We-
after I rush.
We have
through.
3 questions from non-students that I know of and 3 online. Are there any students first? I like to give students a chance first. Sam.
Thank you all very much for coming to speak with us. I have a question in particular for Mr. Peck. You talked a bit about the programming and efforts within EOPS to try to make conditions more humane and better for folks, incarcerated people with an eye to reentry. I'm just wondering in particular about Susan Baranowski. Obviously, recently there's been a lot of news about the violence there. Prisoners Legal Services just put out a letter about how the conditions there and lack of programming have led to an unsafe kind of environment and can lead to higher recidivism rates. And so I'm just wondering how y'all are working with DOC with regard to Sousa in particular to make sure that the folks there are living in a less traumatizing environment where if they have an opportunity for parole in the future, they'll be less traumatized so as to better reintegrate and just what you're doing with regard to Sousa.
Did I mention this all to do well?
You can have more than 5 seconds.
It's a hard question to answer. And I'm not being evasive. When we look at, you know, those environments and trying to change those environments, our approach has been looking at it as a community. Because people work there and people live there. And we can't focus on one group and not the other. And it takes both, you know, the staff and the individuals that are housed there to make that work. And it's like I said, it's a complicated issue. I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you on the side because it would probably take up not only the next 15 minutes, but probably the next panel. But there's a lot to that. I will leave it at that, and I will also, again, I don't shirk the responsibility. We can do better.
Our next question is from Boston College Law Professor Sharon Beckman, who runs amazingly successfully the Boston College Innocence Program.
Thank you all so much for coming to Boston College Law School. And it's really uplifting to hear the ideas that those of you who are working in essentially a punishment arm of the state are thinking about and implementing to be thinking about how to be more humane to formerly incarcerated people and frankly more effective in protecting the public. What I'm kind of stuck on is this analogy of probationers as clients. Because I can't think of any client that would pick a service provider who enforces their means upon the client by searching them at random, arresting them, moving to reincarcerate them. Some of the things Mr. Peck was talking about, which is essentially the enforcement mechanism of the state. And so my question is, maybe this is the third rail, but there's legislators in the room. Why wouldn't it be a better idea to shift all that funding to CPCS? So CPCS has a relatively new and I think small parole advocacy unit, but it is the mission of CPCS to be a service provider to the people. And so I guess that's my question. Like, is that a good idea, a bad idea? I mean, obviously CPCS can't do that robustly with a tiny unit with 1 or 2 people in it or something. But maybe if it had funding, there could truly be a client-centered approach to transitional assistance for the formerly incarcerated. So that's my question.
She is not a plan.
I like that idea.
Anybody?
I might just offer, I don't, the finance end of and the budget stuff is not like, that's not my piece of it, right? But having been a part of the Brave unit, I can honestly say that one of the main reasons that it was so successful and continues to be successful is because you cannot run good programming if people don't feel safe. And that's on the officer perspective, the civilian staff perspective, and the incarcerated individual perspective. We had a lot more officers on that block than you have in a regular traditional block, right? That's just the reality of it. We could not sit here and have this conversation and be a part of this symposium today if we didn't feel safe, that we were in a supportive environment and we're creating a sense of community here together, right? So I just offer that because it is easy to say that we don't, put the money somewhere else. And you're probably right, like we probably do need more legal service, right, for the incarcerated individuals. But at the same time, I would certainly suggest that you cannot run good programming if people don't feel safe. And I would challenge anybody to be in like a Sousa Baranowski block with 2 officers and like 80 to 90 inmates. And I was never a CO. I never worked at Sousa Baranowski. But I just have to have like that realistic kind of perspective of conversation when we start to kind of delve into this stuff. I don't disagree with you at all. And I can only speak from my experience, which is having worked for the department and worked in the Brave unit. Good programming can only be done if people feel safe, and that's both the officers and the incarcerated individuals.
Anybody else want to?
Honestly, that's a terrible idea. Well, here's what I say here, part of probation's job is, there's this inherent conflict, right? Rehabilitation, public safety. And I think the challenge there is trying to get it right. And I think we've spent a lot of time thinking about this and analyzing this, and I think working in that space. And we spend a lot of time every day trying to weigh those two things, but at the end of the day, this is really about how we try to help people and support people and engage people, but at the same time, make sure that people can go home and sleep safely at night. So I think there's always that inherent risk. We're really talking about the issue of resources and making sure that they're allocated the kinds of funding that can bring some of those other pieces to you.
We have several more questions, so you could keep your questions as succinct as possible.
Sure, I'll try to do that. My name is Bea Arneson. I'm a director at the World Peace Foundation, and we're currently doing research on the impacts of restorative justice and peer mentoring on the reentry process. And I have some pretty specific questions. So Mr. Peck, one of the questions that we're asking formerly incarcerated people is whether they've received IDs, birth certificates, or their social security card from the DOC when they're reentering their communities. And so far, not a single participant has said that they've received it. So I'm wondering if this is a priority for the DOC, why are there so many individuals slipping through the cracks, and how is the department ensuring that this is actually taking place? And then the second question I have is for Mr. Tompkins. I'm really struggling to reconcile the differences between care and control. I don't think they're compatible, especially in the context of carceral institutions. So I'm wondering, how are you conceptualizing care and operationalizing these? Okay, really quick.
No, that's all you get. No more.
I don't know if I can be succinct, so I don't know if I can answer the question.
You can answer.
All right.
Go ahead.
I was preparing for that, because from, actually, I don't have the I believe it was from January to May of this year, there were 451 releases. Now, these are criminally sentenced. We have a civil population. Section 35, section 18, Bridgewater, and those are, it's a civil population. So our MOU with the RMV was for the criminally sentenced population. So very important distinction, because those numbers, people will go on the DOC website and they'll say, oh, they released 751 people. The releases are also, if someone gets released from, Bridgewater and goes back to a house of correction, that's a release. Very important, all right, and that's why data is very helpful. Can also be used in other ways. So 451 criminal releases, 232 received the ID through the program. There were 29 already had an ID. So they had the ID in their possession, or a family member at home had the ID. There were 104 that refused. Part of those refusals is they have a valid driver's license. So if the RMV issues them that state ID, it invalidates the driver's license. So people will not, they'll refuse it. And then there was another group, 59, that were ineligible under the MOU. So the MOU covers a very large part of folks who already have a profile in the system. So most of you know, like when you renew your driver's license or whatever, you only go every 10 years, right? Because there's that 10-year window. So if they have that profile set up, they automatically get it. Beyond the 10, they need the birth certificate, and they need, all the other identifying documents to do that. The other piece is, we have a lot of people who were born in other states. And it's a challenge to get those birth certificates. Puerto Rico, for example, they had an issue down there, they invalidated. Birth certificates from, and I should know the dates, but it was from like 2010 to 2020. Invalidated because of some corruption scandal. And when we looked at the number, we had like 500 people in custody who were from Puerto Rico and born, you know, between certain dates that invalidated their birth certificates. We can't get a birth certificate. So otherwise, it's the best answer I have for you. You know, can we do better engaging people? Of course we can. You know, I won't deny that, but you know, I also have experience with some, you know, trying to help some folks where, you know, they're committed on 4 different mitimuses under 4 different names.
All right, so I'm gonna stop you there and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna let the sheriff respond yet because I think you only get your one question because we have so many other people. Sorry.
Oh, I want to answer that.
It's just, it'll come back to you.
Okay.
I'm Bob Mara. This is mostly for Secretary Peck, but could be for the sheriff as well. I think that's the audience too. I was just at a law school experience across the river today, all day experience when they're talking about the media and how the media across the country and locally dehumanizes people in prison. And their families and the communities they're coming from. And what can we do about that? You have taken some really positive steps this year, along with Senator Eldridge, to humanize people inside. The restorative justice stuff, I'm sorry I missed your opening comments, I just experienced that 2 weeks ago. Beautiful work at Norfolk, but what you did with the 6-hour legislative hearing, you put 2 hours worth, the middle key hours, and you allowed people who have life sentences to testify from inside. That was, to many of us, one of the most positive experience, maybe the most positive humanizing experience we've ever seen DOC do. I wonder if you could do more things like that, and will you do more things like that in the coming years?
Thank you. Talking to me or the sheriff?
Both of them.
Sheriff.
Well, and this kind of goes back to, ma'am, I didn't get your name, your question. We see people as people, and when you talk about care and control and humanizing, I think it's incumbent upon us to remain cognizant of the fact that they are human, the residents are with us are human. And so we have to bring programming that speaks to the fact that we care not only about them while they are in our mandatory care, but once they leave. Which means we also have to work with external partners to make sure that that continuum of care is in place. Some of the things we have the BRAVE program, we have a program like that called Peace, where we've taken the 18 to 24-year-olds and put them in a different space. And what we found is that peer-to-peer interaction can be a pretty powerful thing. As you may know that in jail, oftentimes you have what's called keepsakes, and rival gangs are not in the same unit. We have rival gangs in the same unit in the peace program because it's a learning environment. That's how we look at it. We look at it as a learning environment for life, frankly. And so we have to treat people in a humanistic way. When you talk about like politics and campaigns, we have all kind of mechanisms for people to vote while they're with us. We bring in candidates to meet with the residents, and the residents get to ask them these questions. Something that they may not be able to do if they're with us because they can't get to a community meeting, but we think it's important to bring the outside into the inside so that we are showing that we care and that we are really trying to create an environment that is not predatory, create an environment that is sensitive to their needs, and an environment that is not just sensitive to their needs. I don't know if you're here when I mentioned family matters, but to their family members also. But the care and the control goes both ways, because we also have to be sensitive to officer wellness, which is a very important thing. Officers are in these facilities for 16 hours sometimes, and it's actually as if they are incarcerated also. So we have to have
That's helpful to me. There's no way that you are on the same platform as a formerly incarcerated person. As somebody who's taught inside and has 2 family members that are inside, there's no way, sir.
I'm sorry. I couldn't get past the laughing at me. What are you saying? I'm sorry.
There is absolutely no way that correctional officers are on the same platform as formerly incarcerated people.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
It made it seem like that's what
Well,
you were
if you were to
saying.
listen to me, that's not what I said. They are not on the same platform. But what I'm saying is that care also has to be meted out, not just to the folk that have been remanded to us, but the folk that are caring for the folk that have been remanded to us. And so if they don't get the care that they need, they are going to be predatory against the people that have been with us. And we have to work mightily to make sure that doesn't happen. Whether you think that's funny or not, it's not funny. It's a very serious thing. And so we try to make sure that we are talking to our officers and our administrators in a way that says, we cannot treat people like they are less than. It doesn't work.
Yet we still have tons of human rights violations taking place.
Okay, I need to cut this off. We don't have much time. We have a break and some drinks and snacks out there, but we have 2 questions left.
Sorry, I'm Leslie Credo, I'm the founder, executive director of Justice for Housing.
And he's on the second panel.
I'm also formerly incarcerated. My question is to Commissioner Probation, Peck, and Commissioner Suffolk County Sheriff Tompkins. Last year, we housed over 100 formerly incarcerated people on probation and parole, working with your parole officer, your probation officers, and the incredible messenger. My question is, what are you doing to partner with grassroots organizations who are led by directly affected individuals and bringing those dollars back to the community that has been harmed by the system? We're willing to work with your offices, but we haven't had that success. So what are you doing to ensure that you are including the community when you say that you set up programs that are led by your offices? Is that including organizations that have been harmed as well?
So a big part of, typically, if you're going to be, we contract with a lot of different entities. And so it is important that you get on the state vendor ID list and, go after some of the RFPs. We have expanded. I've personally gone out and talked to agencies and communities of color and communities from disadvantaged and marginalized backgrounds to think about how they can get on that list and then apply for some of these contracts. I've got my deputy commissioner for programs. He's been meeting with different local entities, trying to make sure that we expand, especially in communities with folks with lived experiences. I just mentioned in our community justice support centers, we've got advisory boards with formerly incarcerated and folks that are involved in the system. So we're doing a lot of work in that space. And I agree, we need to continue to do more.
No, we are we will have, our registered. The problem is that in order to receive a fund, we need the MOU to be funded.
So here's what I'll say to you, I'll come see you.
Come see us, because that's my question too.
We'll
How do we get funded?
Yeah.
Because they're the same players or
That's-
always at the same.
I'll send you I'll give you my information. We'll meet in my office and we'll talk.
We have one last comment, I believe.
Thank you so much. So I have a comment and just a question with that comment. Senator, Secretary, Andrew, thank you so much for pointing out some of the work that is being done to allow parents to communicate with their kids, to connect with their kids while they're incarcerated. How can we expand that? That's my question. How can we expand allowing co-parenting to assist even though we're behind walls?
That is a great question. It's a problem, and I think it's a problem that we focus so much on the individual. Right, and what their needs are and the supports that they need. Where I think we collectively, and I'm not ashamed to say this, I think where we fail is working with the family. So when you look at reentry. Do we work with the families that are receiving people home? We don't. And that's a problem. So if you have someone who has been incarcerated for X number of years. And they're going home. That changes the dynamic of that house significantly from just from a parenting perspective, right? People may have different parenting perspectives. People, it's typically the mother who's home raising the kids, and she's been there working her tail off for X number of years, and then someone comes into the home. And it changes the whole dynamic of the home. And we have to be able to, we do need to spend more attention and more focus on preparing that family and supporting the entire family unit. Because that leads to better success. They're in that home and it's, stable, they're going to be more successful. And that includes the children. So because someone's incarcerated, doesn't mean they can't be a good parent. Behind the wall, they can still parent behind the wall and they can still be a good parent. So we do have to, get better at that. So I'd be more than happy to talk to you after and we can suggest ways on strategies and how to do that.
So on that note, first, I'd like to say to all 6 of you, thank you for your service. You are all public servants. You all care. Fire and spice is always lively and vibrant, makes for interesting conversations. But truly, we thank you for all you're doing. We hope that those who are formerly incarcerated and those behind the walls are getting the service, getting the guidance, getting the help they need so that when they come out into their own communities and to whatever communities they're welcome into, that they are able to succeed. So with that, I want to tell you about the rest of today. We have now about a 10-minute break. There are chips and beverages out there. I'll give you a second if you need it. And then at 2:30, our second panel starts. I hope you'll stay. And at 4, we have a reception that will be out there with lots of amazing desserts. So the representative would like the last word. Go for it.
Thank you, Conway. I promise y'all I'm more than a pretty face. I just didn't have enough to interject in this conversation, but I wanted to close with a couple of things. The gentleman who attended the convening at Harvard earlier today around folks from the inside who were able to testify, that did not happen without advocacy. I filed the bill around the condition of what was happening in some of our correctional facilities with prisoner legal services, many of you know, and we wanted people who were on the inside to be able to testify. And we had to advocate and fight. Thankfully, the powers that be came around and we are grateful, and I hope you see the power of that. But I am sharing that because in this room full of young, promising, and even seasoned, still promising leaders, y'all's advocacy is so very important. There is great stuff happening here in Massachusetts, and we cannot deny that. And we have so much work to do. I had to file that bill because sadly we had a scathing report from the Department of Justice less than 3 years ago about our correctional facilities and how we're not meeting the moment and doing what we need to do. We also know that there is real safety concerns for both those who are employed behind the walls and those who are living there that need to be addressed. And so I just say that to say, while we celebrate all the wins and good work, and I'm grateful for the forward-thinking leaders we do have here on this panel and in other parts of the Commonwealth, we also have those who are not as forward-thinking. And if you live in those counties, run against them. Thank you.
And I want to say, because the Rappaport Center is all about state and local government, and we encourage all of our law students and young emerging adults to run for office. So you are a role model. Thank you for running for office. Second panel of the day. I also would like to acknowledge Senator Jamie Aldridge back there. The senator is a BC law alum whose work on criminal justice and so many other issues is exemplary. And so thanks for all you do and thank you for being a champion of the Rappaport Center always. I also want to acknowledge and thank Michael Coella, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Programs for the Probation Service. He really helped put this together. He helped get the commissioner and made sure he was here, and he helped me prepare for today's symposium. So thank you, Michael. Okay, as I remarked at the outset of the symposium, this panel is composed of a formerly incarcerated individual, two in fact, one of whom is a student in the Boston College Prison Education Program, as well as professionals here working to provide on-the-ground assistance in housing, education, job placement, and social services. Our moderator for this panel, whom I'm delighted to introduce, is a colleague at Boston College. Patrick Conway is the director of the Boston College Prison Education Program, doing incredibly meaningful work inside MCI Shirley and on campus here at BC. Patrick earned his doctorate in education from Boston College's Lynch School of Education and Human Development. He previously taught composition and literature courses in the Boston University Prison Education Program, and he worked as a criminal defense investigator for public defenders' offices in Washington, D.C., and right here in Boston at CPCS. Patrick's research focuses on the development and expansion of higher educational opportunities in prison, including policy and media coverage analysis, effective teaching practices, and the exploration of student experiences in prison. His scholarship has appeared in multiple publications, among them, but not exclusively, the Review of Higher Education, Teaching in Higher Education, Sociological Forum, and the Harvard Educational Review. He also currently serves as a board member of the New England Commission on the Future of Higher Education in Prison, where he works in partnership with the New England Board of Higher Education and the Educational Justice Institute at MIT to help shape the future of college and prison programs in the New England region. So please, everyone, help me welcome Patrick Conway.
Thank you. That sounds much more impressive than I feel most of the time, but I'll take it. So thank you, Lizzie. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm Patrick Conway, the program director of the Boston College Prison Education Program. And I think some underlying questions that hopefully our panel will be addressing in some format today relate to what does successful reentry look like? What is the kind of current landscape for reentry supports for returning citizens in Massachusetts? And perhaps most importantly, what are the investments, developments, collaborations, and conversations needed to help improve reentry both here in the state and perhaps also more broadly nationally? So the scope of the challenge, as I think our first panel you probably picked up on, is a rather large one. And there's plenty of room for improvement and growth, I think, here in the state. And there's also a lot of potential in people, both on the inside our prisons, and on the outside, in terms of folks who have been directly impacted by incarceration. So as Lizzie mentioned, our panel here during this portion of the symposium is focused on kind of the on-the-ground initiatives. So this is sort of the roll up your sleeves, hands-on work that's being done in the state, which you can probably tell by the reduction in suit jackets that are on this panel. So I'll be trying to facilitate the conversation as much or as best as possible and help highlight some of the really tremendous work that the members of our panel are doing. So just by way of brief introductions now, before turning it over more fully to folks to introduce themselves. On the panel, we have sitting next to me here, Nurudeen Alabi, who is a student in the Boston College Prison Education Program. He was part of our initial cohort out at Shirley, the medium security prison in Shirley, Massachusetts, and he'll be our first student graduating on campus in the spring in Chestnut Hill. Sitting next to Nurudeen is Beth Carter, who is the Director of Reentry at Project Place, an organization dedicated to helping returning citizens reintegrate into society with an emphasis on jobs training and hands-on support. Sitting next to Beth is Leslie Creedle, Executive Director at Justice for Housing, an organization that aims to help dismantle discriminatory housing policies and practices that often lead to high rate of homelessness, reincarceration, and separation from families for justice-involved individuals. And last but not least, sitting on the opposite end of myself is Kristen Dane, Director of Private Social Work Services for the Committee for Public Counsel Services, where she assists and supports private bar attorneys by helping them retain social services for the clients they represent. So again, I'll turn things over more fully to our panelists to introduce themselves and describe the work they do. Libby also asked me to kind of begin by just describing our program, and I'll give sort of a 10,000-foot overview of our program. So we are a full-time Bachelor of Arts program that's based in Men's Medium Security Prison in Shirley, Massachusetts. We started in 2019. And we have admitted a cohort every single year with the exception of the height of the pandemic, now totaling 80 students who have been admitted into the program. And it is a full-time BA program. The degree does not differ at all from what students earn in Chestnut Hill. So there's a lot to say about our program. I think two things for the purposes of today that I'll just touch upon briefly here at the start. That I think make our program somewhat unique, not only here in Massachusetts, but really nationally. This is a program that Boston College is a major priority of the provost and is something that the university is heavily invested in. So we are fully run and credentialized by Boston College. So we don't filter any portion of our degree through another university, which is pretty unique within this space. That means from day one of admissions until graduation, students in our program are Boston College students. In fact, the prison at Shirley is technically considered an additional campus of Boston College. We really enjoy top-down support. So the provost of Boston College, David Quigley, has been a major champion of our work. And has actually, you'll be teaching for the second time a course out at the prison this coming spring. And so that type of top-down leadership allows us to be really robust in terms of what we provide. We're offering 11 courses just this semester out at Shirley, which if you know anything about prisons is somewhat of a miracle, but that's a lot to be providing there. To over 50 students who are currently actively taking courses at the prison. Each student is guaranteed at least 3 courses per semester, many take 4. And so they actually move toward graduation at a rate that compares to what students on campus here. It's 4.5 years inside the prison, typically 4 years on campus. And then the other element I'll just mention here before turning it over to our other panelists is specific to today on the reentry side of things. Our program is one of the only, if not the only program I know of in the country where students are welcomed, not only welcomed onto campus, but welcomed into the institution of Boston College post-release with no additional barriers. There's no reapplication. They start enrolling alongside traditional Boston College students with a one-course, sort of a one-semester transitionary period where they engage, and this is largely due to the success of our assistant director, who's also here, Michelle Brooks. There's a college success class that helps students sort of integrate successfully on campus, introduces them to all the supports they might need, including technology support, academic advising, the wellness center, everything that might be helpful as they continue on their academic journeys. We're one of the few programs, I think, higher ed prison in the country that actually supports that, where the goal is to integrate students to the traditional campus, not to have it be just sort of coming to campus and meeting. And so that's again a very broad overview of our program, but I'll now turn it over to other members of the panel here to introduce themselves, and we'll just kind of go down the line here. So Nurudeen.
How you doing, everyone?
You have to press the button and have it be green and then hold it close to your map.
How you doing, everyone? My name, like my professor said, my name is Nurudeen Alabi. I'm from Roxbury, Boston, and at the age of 17, I was incarcerated. I served 15 years out of the 17-year sentence in 2022, June. I was released, and prior to me being released in 2019, the Boston College Prison Education Program came to Shirley medium where I was being housed at. They came there, but Provost quickly, he came to the prison, he spoke, he introduced what Boston College plan was for them to be giving us college credit courses and getting a degree at while we were at Shirley. And it was a big thing, but it was skeptical because where we was at being in the BOC that certain programs that wasn't for us, it was just offered to us, but as he spoke and people got to get a better understanding, 150 people applied. There was only 45 interviews out of that, 150 that applied. And the first quarter is gonna be only accepting 16 people. And fortunately enough, I was one of those 16 people. And during that whole process, I was excited. Obviously, also started a new trajectory in my life of being part of the prestigious school at Boston College. Being from Boston, I never knew where Boston College was at due to my circumstances of where I grew up at. But unfortunately enough, I had to introduce while I was in prison. And during that first semester, it just blew my mind with the types of courses that I was offered: philosophy, theology, English, my first English professor, abnormal psych, things of that nature was just beautiful, something I was never exposed to, and just opened my eyes, like W. Du Bois said, just lifting that veil of that poverty, of that trauma, things like that, just seeing the other side of the world, just seeing the other side of life, what life can bring me outside of that square mile of prosperity, bring me outside of Boston, into that nature. And now currently, before I was released, I didn't get to finish my degree, so I continue on Chestnut Hill campus. Being 17 and serving 15 years, being an adult, I've never been on a college campus, just the nerves and things of that nature, being scared, trying to learn Canvas, setting up an email, those nerve-wracking, but I had the support of my professors and other individuals as well, the librarians in the library department helped me. And unfortunately enough, I got into the swing of things. Now I'm currently on my senior year, about to get my degree in business. Now we have multiple other students that have been released that's currently here now, that I'm just trying to be that person that just paving the way so other brothers and hopefully sisters will eventually come into the Boston College or any other program like this. And this, now I work at a nonprofit that serves full diagnosis for people that have substance abuse and mental health issues. So I'm a support specialist, so I do that. Currently, I'm on a board for Woods for Others with Sister Jean, and she just helped me know how to just give back on men and women for others. That's what the model of Boston College, and that's how I try to live by. So currently, that's what I'm doing right now. And thank you for having me.
Hi everyone, again, my name is Beth Carter. I'm the Director of Reentry and Employment Services at Project Place. So essentially, I manage the Reentry Division, which includes the pre and post-release programs and employment services of Project Place comprehensive workforce development model. So I think my role has evolved over time as of the needs of the individuals that we serve at Project Place. Unique to our program is that for the last 57 years, Project Place has been dedicated to supporting the needs of underserved and marginalized individuals in Boston. So the agency delivers its comprehensive workforce development model. There's a lot to unpack, but it offers classroom-based education, skills training, credentialing, apprenticeship pathways, an opportunity to have transitional employment in one of our 2 small businesses, and all the while we're holistically supporting our clients with wraparound and case management services. So the model is actually designed, right, to move clients toward obtaining and sustaining employment and career pathways with growth, leading to long-term financial independence and stability, right? In 2003, after years of supporting clients who were justice impacted with securing employment, we created a division created intentionally for programming dedicated to meeting the unique needs of individuals returning from the community from incarceration. And at that same point, we had the opportunity to partner with the Suffolk County House of Correction, which allowed us now to have engagement behind the law prior to release. This way was to improve job readiness by facilitating employment and life skills programming, again, behind the law, case management, and having a real seat at the discharge planning table. From that point, upon release, we're able to extend that. We serve as a bridge, and we said that into the communities by being a resource to mitigate those stressors of reintegration. So when I say we're on the ground, we're on the ground. We will meet you at the door during your release at the HOC. We will provide transportation, financial resources, and accompaniment to your next destination. And we like to say at Project Place, our doors are always open to continue into our workforce development model and get that wraparound care. And then my other side of my position, right, is the employment side. We're talking about justice impacted people. So employment for us is critical element to maintaining your stability. There's many tenets what we talk about for successful reintegration. For us, it's employment. We're dealing with workforce development. And so my role is to cultivate partnerships with employers that are committed to providing employment opportunities with advancement and career growth, not lip service that you don't hire. And ensure that the job search activities that are being conducted on site are actually guiding participants to friendly industries. That our clients that are receiving transitional employment in our businesses have hands-on experience, industry credentials, and are on track to secure employment. And then we shift the focus to employment and retention once someone has graduated, right? So we want them to engage with us in 2 years of our case management and wraparound support services to mitigate any setbacks you may have. We know that's part of the process and foster like the continued and personal and professional growth that we have. And if I could say how I got to the work, we were on the first panel. You know, I like to say I was born into the work because you look at yourself as your younger self as a child and you always have compassion for people and want to help. And then you develop your career and you get the education, and I've always had a passion for community justice and systems. And it wasn't like when it came full circle, when I was a probation officer in New York, prior to being in Boston. And when I saw the balance, they talk about the balance effect of it, keeping public community safe while monitoring the probation and making sure that it's short and they are able to meet these orders and conditions of probation. And as I spoke on the first panel, it's a lot of check-off boxes. They said, get a job, report every day, take a year and get a GED. And you say, wow, is that easy? Nobody really, would be on it. And you do have the authority when you're an officer, but I used to tell probationers, at the time, that I have no power. If you're able to do these things, that there's nothing I can really do except tell the court that that's what you're doing. And I chose at that point to be more of a support to navigate those boxes on the orders of condition. To make sure that I pride myself on having them successfully complete. To have people early terminate and have less violations or maybe just more sanctions, like sanctions in lieu of incarceration or return to incarceration. And so when life brought me to Boston, I was able to land my job at Project Place, and it was like beautiful because they had this existing workforce development model, and I wanted to merge my expertise into that model and bring the reentry lens, but also having a former job in law enforcement, so to say, I can actually come to the table and meet with stakeholders. They said we do have a common shared vision. Public safety is also keeping people in the community. People that return have access and opportunity. Some of those checkoff boxes are exactly what we're trying to achieve, but trusting us to help with the process and don't apply the pressure to return someone or to, let them work with us and we'll help you, get where you need and we need. And that's keeping people in the community and keeping everyone safe.
Awesome.
Good afternoon. I want to thank BC for allowing me to be here to talk about the work of Justice for Housing. First, I want to say I am a survivor of incarceration. I am also a mother who survived the loss of her daughter to gun violence while I was serving a federal prison sentence. Which is the catalyst that brought me to found Justice for Housing. Justice for Housing, we are the champions of change. As a whole, Justice for Housing is a unique organization. Today, I will talk about, you will hear how we dismantled the public housing authorities' punitive housing policies. And we will talk about what is new at Justice for Housing and some of the successes and impact we have had in the community. Justice for Housing has created innovative programs that have been mimicked and it's historic in nature. We were able to break down the barrier in public housing justice. Before Justice Housing was founded, nobody was housing formerly incarcerated people. We were that catalyst of change. Since then, we have paved the way for other organizations to mimic and I guess use our model. For example, the city of Boston, as the commissioner just spoke about the housing justice and the 25 voucher program. That is a program that is Justice for Housing's model. And we are glad that they were able to enact and implement a program just like the stable housing and reintegration program at Justice for Housing. Also, UTEC has adopted our model. And the reason why they have mimicked our program is because it works, right? We have been successful. We have housed over 367 formerly incarcerated individuals in the last 2.5 years. And we have a 0% recidivist rate. So I will talk about our work in a whole, and you will hear about the impact that we have had. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, for moderating, and to Boston College Law School and the Rappaport Center for inviting me here today. I also just want to thank all of you for joining us today, those who are here in person, those who are here virtually, and those who are going to be seeing this later on. So my name is Kristen Gaines. I'm the Director of Private Social Work Services at CPCS, and I am truly grateful to be on this panel listening to the amazing speakers. I've actually had the opportunity to work with both Beth and Leslie and their organization, and many of the organizations that are here today, as well as Parole and Probation and the Suffolk House of Corrections, worked with all of them. Because the work that we do at CPCS and Public Defender, we are all across the Commonwealth. And so my role really is to connect our attorneys to social service professionals both on a pretrial matter, but we're also doing more on a post-conviction matter. And when I say post-conviction, those are the people who might be released on parole, people who might just be released on have a date of release but haven't registered with the SORT, which are Sex Offender Registry Board. Those who may be released on a court process through our innocence program and state of execution, which they may not actually have the benefit of a reentry plan through the DOC because they're just released from court. And the thing that I think about the individuals that I'll be talking about today are some of the people that I support are people who have been in prison longer than many of you have been alive. People who have done 30, 40, 50 years. And when they talk about coming out of prison into society, they liken it to a sci-fi TV show. You put me into a time warp and you put me ahead. The biggest challenge with some of the individuals that I work with are seatbelts. They have not ever had to wear a seatbelt before. When they get into my car, they have to wear a seatbelt. And that's something that just didn't happen. The idea of not having cash and using a card. So Anthony, who's the chief counsel of CPCS, clearly is very aware of what's happening on the ground, because a lot of what I was going to say, you've already addressed. And these are real differences. The expectation, I had a client recently who went out with a rake and he wanted to go and rake people's lawns. I thought that they were gonna get called on him. He said, I used to do this before. I would just ask people, it's fall time. Can't do that. People are not going to be receptive to that. You don't go in and just fill out a paper application. You have to do it online. People don't know how to do that. I had people who've never worked on a cell phone, never sent an email before. So these, when we think about reentry challenges, we absolutely have to think about the housing. We have to think about the employment. We have to think about all the things that they need to sustain themselves in the community. But we also have to think about the things that we just take for granted every day, that we just painfully learn that these individuals who have been away from our community, our society, have never had to be exposed to. And the way I kind of came into this is, I also was in the Massachusetts Department of Corrections, but I was there as a clinician. And I was there for a couple of years, and at the time, prior to my going into the department as a clinician, I had worked with people with behavioral health needs in the community. I had worked with people with significant disabilities. I had worked with people who were unsheltered and housed. But when I went into the Department of Corrections, what I noticed is how much of a catch-all it was. And I was there so long ago, now everybody knows it, but at the time I was just shocked. It catches everybody. It is the one institution that cannot say no. And the people who are in custody with the significant histories of trauma, mental illness, substance use, who have been in and out of different systems, the way they had touched the systems before, they might have been in systems where they aged out and they didn't have really good, robust support services when they left. They were denied services because they didn't meet certain clinical criteria, or their service needs were too great, right? And so where do they all end up? Because they're now unsheltered, or they can't engage the services the way people want them to, they end up in the correctional facility. And now the correctional facility is warehousing and trying to figure out how do we manage all of these different needs. On the flip side of that, I also saw how punitive corrections can be. I saw a lot of the harms that can happen. I saw people who were racking up D reports for behaviors that were completely associated with their disabilities, being put into isolation, being strapped down because they weren't able to comply with orders. Really significant harm. And then we wonder why these individuals, when they are coming out of those environments, are not able to adjust. And I'm going to share this one story. So I was only in corrections about 4 years, and I left every day, so it wasn't like I lived there. But when I left corrections and I started to work on the outside, I had this experience where I couldn't gauge time well. I was either getting to places really early or I was getting there late. And it was this phenomenon that I couldn't understand, because when I was working in corrections, I was perfectly fine getting to places on and off. But when I left, I had such a hard time adjusting. Now remember, I wasn't incarcerated. I left every day. And I was only there for 4 years, but people who are there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years are told all the time what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And then they come out and someone gives them a condition and says, you need to go get your drug screen. You need to comply with the conditions of this house. And we have residential programs, thankfully, that will take in our individuals, but they have no idea how to actually support somebody who's had long-term incarceration. So there's a lot of great initiatives and work that have been done, as you heard earlier, and there's still a lot of work that we can do. And we're hoping that today, with this panel, we're gonna talk a lot about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So hopefully people should just feel comfortable jumping in. It hopefully has a little bit more of a conversational tone. I thought a good place to begin, I think oftentimes these types of discussions can turn negative or quite depressing pretty quickly, and I thought, let's start maybe with something that we are excited about in our spaces, that is the developments that are positive, and then we'll definitely save some time for areas for improvement as well. But I thought maybe we could start with Beth and Leslie on employment and housing. What are some developments that you are personally excited about within your own domain and progress that you see being made?
Can I get this slide to look? I don't know, it's not trying on.
It will appear in a minute.
Okay, can we go to the second slide? Right there, okay. What we are excited about is, Justice HUD, the Office of Housing, Fair Housing and Equity adopted, Justice for Housing's policies. We created 12 policy recommendations from our Far From Home report. HUD adopted 6 of our policies. These are what is going to be federal law. This is not announced yet. HUD hasn't announced it, so this is, if you want to get a preview of what's to come. But we were able to dismantle the public housing system and change the punitive housing laws, and HUD adopted our policies. And so we are proud to announce that we changed federal law without filing one piece of legislation. And some of the changes are a look back period. They used to be able to look back 10 years on people's queries when they do a background check. HUD is making that 3 years. Other changes are, and when they do a background check, they usually deny you automatically when you have a criminal record. What we changed was that they asked for mitigating factors. They let you present your story and tell why you should be housed before they deny you. So that has changed. Another change we have made is they can't just use arrest records. People who live in public housing, if they were arrested, they were automatically evicted. So we changed that. Now they have to wait for a conviction and then do a mitigating and let them explain themselves. We also changed mitigating factors. So, I'm sorry, the no visit, no reside agreement. That means that if someone is arrested, housing authorities tell you that you either have to remove that household member from your lease, or if you are the lease household member, you lose your voucher, right? And so, and they bar you from living in public housing for life. So we changed that where now it is a shorter period and they have to have a hearing before they determine taking or removing a voucher or removing someone from your home. What was happening is parents were being separated, children were being separated. If a child, like 18, 19-year-old gets arrested, they were telling that mother she had to choose between her voucher and her child. And so this new law prevents that child. And we all know what happens when our children are without parental supervision, you know. When I was incarcerated, you know, my daughter was killed because I wasn't there. So this law right here is very important to me. It's keeping families connected, keeping families together. So that is some of the changes we have made at Justice for Housing. Also, we just are launching beginning re-entry in educational services. And that acronym stands for my daughter's name, Bree. BRIE, we call it Breezeway. And what we will be doing is we will be educating and teaching other organizations how to house formerly incarcerated people. We have become the experts at it. When we first started Justice for Housing, we couldn't get landlords, we couldn't get developers to house formerly incarcerated people. But as time went on and they saw the success we have had, we have people getting off of probation early because of their being housed. The recidivism rate has lowered, and I know that they contributed to their reentry, but I say beg to differ. It is from grassroots organizations like ours and Christine and our partners who have been doing the work on reentry. And so the recidivism rate in Massachusetts for the first time has lowered to 26%. It's been 35% for over 25 years. So I contributed to all the work and collectively, even the work of that they are doing at the DOC. I think it's a collective statistic. We should be leading this work. All right, I understand how they have put programs together, but I figured that to me, as being formerly incarcerated, is offensive. For them to be leading the work that we're doing, it's like Stockholm syndrome, right? You harm somebody and then you want to fix them. And so I don't think that is the way to go. I truly think that the Department of Corrections and Probation and Parole should partner with organizations like ours. They get $25 million. We got $0 from our state last year. Nobody got any reentry money last year. And I can say it's not for foundations like Chickering, United Way, Schusterman, New Commonwealth Fund, Hines, Butler. We wouldn't have the resources that we needed to house over 367 people. I get more support from national organizations than I do from my own state, and there's something wrong with that. The statistics that we have, the impact that we have had, there should be no reason why we shouldn't be getting 1 million of that 25 million that they get to help formerly incarcerated people. We housed 100 probation and parolees last year, 100 of them, and with no contract, no support from the DOC. Each person we house cost us $4,000 to house each one person. And so I say that because you guys, they are using our services, but not supporting us, right?
Yep.
They mimic our program, right? Because it works. And so if you're gonna mimic our program, at least compensate us for our expertise, right? Because we are the experts, formerly incarcerated people, we know what we need. And so this is why Justice for Housing is so successful, is because of the lived experience that we have. Thank you.
Beck, a similar question on employment. What are some things that you find particularly exciting right now within your own space?
In our space, from the workforce development side, we do see a lot of employers who are really receptive and open to hiring people with a criminal record. And sometimes they're frankly talking to us about how do we do it. We know Massachusetts represents like a lot of industries that are not core front, like healthcare, tech, and things like that. And sometimes it's a blanket no, but employers have been coming and wanting to take a healthier look at their what they do and say, is there places and spaces where we can actually hire people? And these talks that I'm having are very promising, especially with healthcare, that's always been. Also, what I see is, I'll use Leslie's slide, mitigating factors, right? A lot of these employers use third-party outsourcing to check criminal records. And usually you just come back, no, look, you can't get a job, but I do see employers reaching back and using mitigating factors. So one thing we are doing is making sure everyone can tell their story. That has been very impactful for people getting jobs. So I think that's a great stride too. And then from ban the box, I will say, I'll give you a mixed bag, but there are some, I'd say old applications and papers that are probably not up to, code with ban the box. So that's something I want to work on, but a lot of employers are utilizing that, not circumventing, going around trying to ask people about their criminal record when they shouldn't be. And like I said, mitigating factors, I think is the biggest thing, because there's been industries that have been no, and now I'm starting to see folks getting in, they're actually looking at, okay, well, once this happened this year, you haven't done anything, you have all this great stuff that you're doing in the middle, and just more willing to take a chance. They recognize that there's like an untapped talent pool. Not everyone has a long gap in without working, they have skills. Some people just might need a credential to update them, and they're bypassing this for a record, And so I say, if we look at our justice systems and say, you served your time, the crime is over. Why is this the gift that keeps on giving? There's a stigma attached to it. We talk about it lasts with you forever, and it shouldn't be that hard. So it's like we need to change how we feel and think and a lot of other things about incarceration. But if it's over, it needs to be over. And then let people have opportunity and access, and not say, hey, no, when we have skilled people and they want to work, it's very, life changing. You want to be able to take care of yourself. And it's like the social determinants, as we say, of health, like you need employment to sustain your housing, to do all these things. Like we all operate together. We cannot do this alone. I'm one arm of it. I do workforce development. But it just needs to be a coordinated care so that people can sustain in the community. But employers are coming there. The city of Boston has really been great. They have their vendors list where we can look at who is really willing and receptive to hiring people with employee-friendly records. We know we have like tax incentives. A lot of small businesses, they don't know how to take advantage of that. They don't know how to utilize that system, but it's ironic that like large corporations like Home Depot know how to do and use those credits. But as an agency, if an employer is willing to take that, we might have our finance people go in and teach them how to utilize it. We just get one person employed with a livable, sustainable wage, able to take care of their families. We have a better chance of keeping them in the community, keeping their families intact, keeping those communities safe. So there are some things on the employment front. Thanks.
And so somewhat related to this, and to a point Leslie was making about, prioritizing the voices of formerly incarcerated people, particularly people who have been successful in reentry, to turn to Nurudeen, and I may be biased on this, but as someone who has shown serious success in reentry, what have been some of the components that you have found, either the supports or the aspects of your reentry that you found most important in being able to develop post-release?
Yeah. It's too much. For my reentry, I believe like organizations like this really matters, and the two key components of reentry for myself, and I've seen with others, is definitely housing and employment. Housing is like the biggest thing so far, because when you come home after a certain amount of years, like for myself, I was 17, I lived with my mother, and now I'm 30-something years old, and coming home, basically, luckily enough, I have family for that support, but throughout the years, seeing people go home and come back, they didn't have family, and I'm the type of person that asked questions because I feared, my biggest fear was coming back. So the people that I did see come back, asked them like, what made you come back? Like, what happened? You don't mind me asking. And the biggest thing, I didn't have nowhere to go. what am I gonna do? I don't have a job, I'm a felon. DOC didn't help me when I got out because I left from national security. I left from DDU, which DDU is basically a prison inside of a prison. So no interest in their mental health, things like that. So just having organizations like this and just having networks like the Boston College Prison Education Program is one of the biggest things in other organizations and other institutions as well that help me as well. Is just being able to have a network and just having that opportunity. Every job that I had wasn't because I applied, they seen my resume and they hired me. My employment was through educational programs like DC, Hubs, and organizations like that vouched for me, that told me that, oh, okay, this person, a letter of recommendation to the employer that got me this job, that helped me go off my own reentry and things of that nature. But those are the two things, is housing and employment amongst other things, but organizations like this definitely helps. Justify how I've been hearing about her since forever, and that was like one of my biggest things, is housing, where am I gonna live and where am I gonna start my life as a free individual. But those are the two main key components, is just housing and employment, because when you're an adult, you wanna feel like you're an adult. Everybody wants to live on their own, start their family, things of that nature, and as formerly incarcerated, you wanna live those things too. You wanna be able to support your family, support your kids, and things that help your family. And you can't do that if you're not able to find a job and not able to rest your head at night.
I just want to give you a pause for, the BC, my turn, and holistic, it's wraparound services. We partner with projects, we partner, with CPCS. One of the main key components to reentry is trauma. I came home broken. All of us have the same PTSD, right? That is so important. Mental health, transformative prison project, are programs that are needed. And so for me, I would say one thing that is needed first is housing, right? You need a stable place to heal from the trauma of incarceration first, then employment. Those are the key to a successful reentry. Once you have both of those, our constituents are now entrepreneurs. We have people who are about to buy their first homes. And so these are stabilization, case management, and having somebody there who can teach you how to turn on your electricity, right? How do I get a cable bill? These are the things that we deal with every day. How do we fill out an application? Computer, digital literacy is big. Nobody knows how to use a computer when they come home. Credit barriers. So we have financial literacy partners. And so we have a holistic approach. So housing, case management, and wraparound services are key. Another area that I want to focus on too is DCF. Department of Child Family Services is one of the biggest problems for not only formerly incarcerated people, but anybody. 65% of the population in prison comes home homeless. 30% of them have a child in foster care. In order for them to get their children back, they have to have a stable home. So we reunited 67 families with their children last year. My pet children are aging out of foster care. Benjamin's stand-up program here, Fatherly Justice, is one of our partners that helps us with our families who DCF is trying to take their children. Okay, so I would say those are the key to successful entry for us.
And something Leslie just kind of alluded to,
Education.
and Kristen also alluded to earlier, is the idea of kind of, you know, it's a lot to expect folks to be successful if their reentry really is starting upon release. A lot of times reentry should be starting on the inside. So Kristen, I was wondering if there are elements, what do you wish folks who are behind the walls currently, what do you wish they knew about the release process that might better facilitate successful reentry?
Thank you, Patrick. So I can say for people who are behind the wall, and this isn't coming just from me, this is actually coming from people who I work with who say to me, I wish I could go behind the wall and say to those people who are waiting to come out, take advantage of all the programming that you have access to, which can be difficult because there are lots of wait lists and there are lots of reasons why there are barriers, but do what you can to get into those programs, take advantage of what you can learn. I know like with Jericho Circle, education, there are opportunities there. But the other thing there is, we would say, is you have to be in the driver's seat as much as you can about reentry. That as much as when you're behind the wall, someone gives you a piece of paper and says, this is where you're gonna live, here's your ID, here's your mass health. Even if they get all of those things, the minute you walk out that door, first of all, DOC can't support you anymore. That's just not something that they're able to do. You're gonna be reliant on all these outside supports, and that can be a mixed bag, as somebody said, about how reliable those services may be. If you are able to get in contact with the behavioral health or justice involved individuals, I would say please do. The BHJI workers, they are navigators who can meet you at the door. They can help support you so that reentry. They can also meet you behind the wall for referrals made on your behalf. But what they're going to say to you is that it's not easy. It is a lot of work. Another person said, don't let people do things for you. Learn how to do it. People are very good at saying, let me do it for you. I don't have time to show you how to do this. But if you have someone who sits and teaches you how to use your cell phone, teaches you how to get a Charlie card, teaches you how to use an ATM, you become more functional in the community, you feel better about yourself. And so those are things that at the beginning, you have to be not only willing to ask for help, but to actually demand that somebody gives you that time. And that is something that we're asking the HJI to do, we're asking other reentry navigators to do, is to stop doing it for them and showing them how to do it. There are other things that have come up, but I think that those are some of the key aspects. I think that's what I'll stop.
So now to turn towards sort of some of the sticking points that a lot of us deal with. One that just kind of came up that I was thinking about as you were speaking there is, right, there's a lot of value in having folks who have been successful in reentry be able to provide mentorship and breaking down barriers where, you know, for instance, we tried to have Nurudeen come to our graduation this past September on the inside, and he wasn't allowed to. And to the DOC's credit, they really helped us have a fantastic graduation. But, you know, being able to bring in someone like Nurudeen so that students not only take inspiration from that, but also can learn from his experiences and ask questions would be an invaluable resource. But now we can kind of maybe move down the table a little bit. So for Nurudeen, what would be some of the kind of the sticking points for you in reentry that have been really challenging that you find yourself coming up against often?
Initially, my biggest issue was identification, because I didn't know how big it was at the time. I just felt like if they know who I am in prison, they should know who I am when they release me, which I thought it was common sense. But this identification, just being able to open a bank account or to get a job, because they want to know who you are, things of that nature. So that was a big sticking point for me, and just able to have access to certain resources. Like currently right now, I'm on probation, and the last panel spoke about how much resources they get. I'm currently on probation. I'm those people that they talk about statistics, that data, they talk about, I am that data. So I feel like they should contact that data, they should contact people like me and reach out. I only see my probation officer once a month. Oh yeah, okay, everything's still the same, all right, bye. Never, oh, are you okay, what's going on? You have employment, yeah, okay, we don't, all right, that's not part of your situation, next, and they go on. So it's just like, with it, those situations like that, it's like everybody's not fortunate to have family members that help them in that situation, so it's on them in a sense because that's their job, and they're not fulfilling that job to their best ability because there's people that's going back recidivism. It happens, it might blow, but it still happens. Bad data is individual. So I feel like the same point of the re-entry is just being able to reach out, connect, and like they said, this we should be leading these talks, like they're having meetings with themselves and talking about people that they don't know, they don't interact with. I don't believe personally, my whole entire 15 years, I never seen I had a probation walk through the prison. I never seen the commissioner walk through the prison I was at. Obviously, we just look at these people at names on a piece of paper that we don't know. Of course, we're not gonna trust somebody that we've never met before. We don't talk to strangers, that's how I do it. So I'm not gonna talk to somebody that I don't know. Just like regular common folks would not talk to somebody they don't know. So that engagement, that interaction, I see these women at different events, different speaking engagement. So I know that I don't know them personally, but I know what they do and I trust them with what they do. So that's how you get things done when you have faith in people, knowing people, and just being able to trust in their work. And she has data to prove it and things like that. She's getting things done. So that's how you change situations that helps only incarcerated people, in my opinion.
And I should briefly mention, we also have 3 other students from our program here, Suprema San, Marquise Mitchell, and Luis Flores. In the It'll underscore, I think, the wealth of knowledge and experiences that can really serve in mentorship positions for folks who are on the inside or initial transitions the outside. But to continue for Beth, a similar question, what would you see as some of the sticking points within your domain?
Similar thing about ID not being there. Mostly I interface with Suffolk County House of Corrections, so that period of stay is very short. But it's the same thing. People walking out, no identification, no social security card, no birth certificate. I mean, we are fortunate to be able to intervene, but someone should have a sense of identity when they're leaving. There is a pitfall. It's true, like some folks. We had a client who birth certificate was out of Jersey. You know, it takes a lot longer, but if from a workforce, what we do with workforce development, we need the work documents. You're not gonna get a job without getting that. It's just the regular role of all of that. I think like agency interface, which is interesting, right? Like if we have shallow funds to take care of like license and fine. I'm not here to bash, but like the R&B is a very difficult place to be. And you know, some folks, they have ID, some folks have a license. You might still see from a criminal justice reform perspective, people having fines and fees based off of charges on there. R&B can't explain it. It's kind of like an archaic system. I think I was telling my staff the other day. You can't even split payment. People, thousands of dollars. And we're an agency that's $1,000 and another agency is willing to commit, I can't do that, you know, make this happen. And it shouldn't be so hard, you know, like, let's pay it. So those are the hidden things that happen. So I think that's interesting. Department of Revenue, child support, digging things. And I'm saying, okay, well, we want to get people a job, like having a license might be game changing, especially like warehouse industry, a lot of this stuff is outside the Boston corridor, and it's like, no. And again, it's just like another block, and so I find like, me and the team are just always going through hoops, just trying to get the basic things that we all should have, and it's like, again, shouldn't be so hard. I just want to speak to like, I agencies in Boston, a lot of us are in Boston. And yeah, I'm lucky to be able to go to Suffolk County House of Correction. But for me, like the integration is across many counties, the state DOCs, and even as myself was clear, it's been very hard. I would love to talk to people in DOCs about when they're stepping down. Right, like a good reintegration plan includes like what area neighborhood you're like going to. Doesn't mean you're going back to where you came from, maybe, you know, that's not where you wanna go. Maybe you'd be at this side of town and you wanna come to Boston, so when you wanna have the people in the room and have the resources and support there at that discharge planning. So like ultimately, I do think reintegration needs to be coordinated more. And so if I have a person that wants to go out to Worcester, why can't I tap into that network? It doesn't work like that. I have to dig and figure out like how to do this and maybe call us, do you know somebody? And we should all just be at the table. From all levels of administration down to the grassroots, and, you know, talking about what does coordinated reintegration look like? There should be multiple justice for houses, multiple places doing work for, you know, having this and just to ensure people are successful. The biggest takeaway is identification is still a major issue and a barrier to existing. Because not having an idea, like that's criminal in itself, you know, you need to be somebody, you know, out here. Yeah.
So I'm conscious of, we also want to save about roughly 15 or 20 minutes for a Q&A, but to Leslie and Kristen, maybe a little quicker just so that we save time for that. But also there's a lot of folks here in the audience that I think, you know, would be interested in law students, you know, what can they do to potentially help, and maybe related to, you know, what are some of the sticking points and what are ways that general, you know, in general, people can kind of get involved and help.
To be really quick, I would say, you know, education is key. BC going into the prisons, vocational programs are needed, so that people can get livable wages. We just launched a program where we house individuals and we paid for them to get their CDL licenses. We had 10 individuals graduate, 9 of them got their CDLs, 5 of them are working for the city of Boston. The other 4 are working for Beanie Brothers and other trucking companies, and they're making $80,000-$90,000 a year. They're able to pay their own rent, they don't need a voucher. And so that's the way that we're trying to lead, is to get people into livable wages. The second thing I would say is prevention. We're regrouping and we're doing pre-trial now. We're catching people in the courts. So we're partnering with the courts to get people housed to prevent them from incarceration. And so that's the next move for Justice for Housing. And I just want to mention one other thing, the millionaire tax bill, if Senator Eldridge is in here, there are state dollars that we can use, that all of us here can use for workforce development. And that needs to be allocated to grassroots organizations who are doing the work.
Right, so I'm gonna try to be brief. I think one of the things that you're hearing about is a lot of more of the global individuals who are incarcerated, who are coming out, but I really want to put a plug in there for people who are in marginalized communities. We have a lot of people with apparent and non-apparent disabilities who are have a lot of difficulty with reintegration back into our communities. I would compel the Department of Mental Health, the Department of Developmental Services, to Mass Rehab to come to the table and be more of a participant in the reentry needs, because they are part of the reason why people end up in the carceral system, and they need to be part of how people get out and support them, because otherwise there isn't going to be a successful reentry. Those are the people who fall through the cracks, who can't actually engage in workforce development or in education in the way that other people can. I also would want to say that in addition to housing and jobs, all that are really important, healthcare and behavioral health. We are here in a law school, but for anyone who is here in social services or who are in treatment, we have to do better about treating the individuals who are coming out of the systems. We are still very far behind in how we give medical care, behavioral health care, and treatment to people who've been in systems. We still have a huge discrepancy with racial and ethnic divides. So we have to get better about that as well. And then I just want to say, for individuals who are coming out, The sense of belonging to a community is huge. We take for granted having families and communities with us. If you are someone who lost everyone in your family, or you had an offense that was considered so terrible, no other community will accept you, you're looking for some community support. But the way our system is developed now is that people cannot support each other. This peer support, people can be violated if they're on parole and they are in communication with somebody else who's also on parole or who has a conviction. And they may be the only people who really understand what's happening. It is a catch-22 system. And there are so many examples I could give to you. I know we don't have time, but I would say to you, all of you, what you can do, no matter where you are, is really consider who you're voting for DA. Think about your education systems. Think about the communities that you are in. Are they open to receiving people who are formerly incarcerated? Think about your own anti-racist practices. And I want to put all that out. Thank you.
Now we'll take some time for Q&A if folks have questions for anyone.
Well, only hesitating because you asked a question earlier. Is there anyone who has it? Have a question? You know, I tried. I'll come back to you.
Quickly, next one, Keith Mitchell, did 17 years in prison. 16, just to add on to what she was saying, it's very important to do something about that because I know Nurudeen since I was a child. We were incarcerated together. We've had the same DA, same lawyer, at about the same time. We can't be in contact with each other. Like for instance, in a scenario, I live about an hour and a half away from the school. On a day where I needed a ride to school, I couldn't get a ride to school. I could go to school with him, but I couldn't get a ride to school or a ride back home from school. So that would make me have to actually miss class, and my education is important to me. So I end up paying for an Uber, it comes out to like $160. And it's just a big strain. And somebody said, I think his name is Muhammad Abdi. He said that imagine going to college and being around your brothers and sisters in school that you go to school with, and then not being able to speak to them ever again in life. And for somebody on parole, that's what it feels like. I know Nurudeen more than I know some of my own cousins and people in my family, because I've been on units with them in different prisons. We've just been around each other. And he knows what I'm going through. When I came home, he came home about 2 years before me. Just call him, ask him like, how'd you do this? How'd you do this? And that's how I get most of my resources. So that's important.
I say advocate for it, advocate for change and make a legislation. If you want to change that, change it.
So this is a question for Beth or Leslie, Kristen too, but employment, three of the biggest sectors, employment sectors in any town, especially this town, are hospitals, universities, and local government, city, state government. Are you getting anybody employed in any of those sectors who have come out? In Baltimore, they're getting hundreds of people and have done it for over 10 years. They got an award from Obama for Johns Hopkins Hospital for doing that. I worked for hospitals in this town for the last 50 years. My impression is none of the hospitals are doing anything really with people coming out helping with employment. I'm sitting next to a guy I know, he's one university, Larry Gennari, he's doing something awesome, helping people with entrepreneurial jobs. But I'm unaware of it, and I would like to be more aware. Is any university hiring people? Is any hospital hiring people? Is it any local government, except for the city of Cambridge, through Cambridge Works? Is any local government hiring anybody coming out?
We've had the cities hire people. Hi, Professor Jari. I took this class, entrepreneur class. I welcome anybody who's looking to be an entrepreneur to take this class. That hospitals, we haven't had any people being hired, but they have offered us financial resources. But no, to your point, you're right, like, no, they haven't.
Here, we have somebody who wants to comment on that.
We can do better, but I can say that Mass Health does hire individuals with lived experience as PCAs. So you can be hired into.
What is that?
So the personal care attendant program, so you could work and you could take care of a family or a loved one under their PCA program. And so that's something, I don't have any business cards with me right now, but I'm Meghan Dupuy with UMass Chan Medical School. And so that is one great program. We've been touting that through our BHJI program. And then second, Reliant Medical Group in Worcester is also now willing to hire individuals with lived experience to help do their medical scheduling, because that's an area that they're looking for. So those are two just right off the bat. Obviously, we have a robust healthcare system, we can do better, but those are two that are starting.
Thank you. We have some questions in front. You first, and then you.
It was, I was going.
Wait.
I don't even think I heard it. So BMC does actually have a program for formerly incarcerated. It's not huge and it's not that well known, but they are trying, and MGB, Master General Brigham's, is now trying to partner with us, the director of the program in Charlestown. Charlestown Adult Education and Reentry. And they are trying to partner with us for young adults at risk and who have been formerly incarcerated. And I just had a statement really, and I know everybody on this panel has bumped into this if you're in the workforce world, but when we try to get somebody employed and they're on even just probation for anything, it reads open case. And so, you know, I work with Boston Housing Authority. They're wonderful at letting me break that door down. A lot of my employees have been formerly incarcerated, but I do always have to explain that I'm looking at him, he's not incarcerated. Like the case is not, it reads incarcerated. And so Leslie, I'm charging you with this since you're a policy changer. We need to fix that. We need to fix the fact that it says open case or still incarcerated, a pretrial. It's very difficult to get people on pretrial a job. I mean, we just started a computer class, so that actually losing it back there. With the Brook House, the CRJ, so that we can try to get them jobs. They can be on pretrial and parole there. But it's very difficult because every time we send Corey over, it reads incarcerated.
So who would fix that?
I need parole. You know, it's a weird rule.
Yeah.
The add-on is that 5 years, that Corey,
Wait, you have to, just speak now.
the problem, to tell the gentleman in the back, the problem is when they do the third party Corey, like a organization or company employer, they'll be Corey friendly. But they send the Corey out to a third party. So I found out yesterday, if your Corey's less than 5 years, they're not getting snowed up. You're not getting over 5 years, they're considered. So that's the problem. So they're willing to hire someone with a Corey if your charge is less than 5 years, nothing over 5 years ago, you're okay. And that's the problem. That's
Can I just add something?
Of course, then push that closer to you,
So
yes.
what I'm thinking, and the court is really for Massachusetts, and so depending on the job, they can reach out, like a federal, like let's say you're working for FedEx, they're gonna do a different type of court, which will encompass all the states, and so that's an issue, you know, as well, depending on like the industry and the type of background check someone's gonna do.
Does everyone here know what Corey is, criminal offender record information?
We need to get rid of the court.
Yeah, we need to get rid of the quarry, that's the end, like, get rid of the quarry.
So I pretty much. I love it. I know Leslie and I know that's on the panel, and my main thing, I was incarcerated. I wasn't able to access my daughter or access housing while I was on probation and all that other good stuff. And for the 2 years that I was on probation, it said it looked like an open case, right? And that's what stopped me from getting Boston Housing Authority, right? And they just put it aside. Nobody says nothing. They don't tell you why. You're just stuck in limbo, right? Finally, I got a manager to say, this is the reason that you're in limbo. Work on getting off. probation, either early or whatever, you'll get housing. It was going back to the question that somebody asked earlier, how do we fix that? How do we seriously, with legislation, yes, but also gathering all our organizations and our pool together and saying enough is enough, we need to house these people.
I can understand. I have to defend the Boston Housing Authority. I know they were once punitive, but right now, they are, being, very Corey friendly to folks, and Cambridge Housing Authority. We are traveling the country, with Boston Housing Authority, and the state to update all the housing authorities' admin plans. And so, this issue, will be less of an issue. It's not perfect, but it's a start. And so I just want to say one more thing, that Justice for Housing will be on Tel Williams' show, the Balancing Act. They are doing a feature of Justice for Housing. And so I'll give you the date that will be on TV, but they're doing a feature on the work that we are doing. And it's really done at the local levels. Every housing authority has their own rules. There's no legislation, there's no policy, there's nothing to fight. So you have to fight them locally, one by one. And so that's the work that we do. That's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I'm kind of getting back into the criminal justice reform, but I came here with a question about identification. And I couldn't believe how many times it came up today. So now my question is, who's doing something about this, and how can the rest of us join in and give it help do that?
Well, I know that the Undersecretary
I know
started a program, but I know he said there's more to be done.
Yeah,
Leslie.
GBIO has a bill, Greater Boston Interface
I
Agency.
come from GBIO.
Oh, okay. And so we have been fighting them and getting them to implement the policy that they passed, right? And it did pass, but they just aren't doing it. So the question is, how do we get them to do it? By using our voices, putting it out there, do an op-ed, join our committee. We have a committee, GBIO, if anybody wants to join, please let us know. But we need people to advocate for this. Come out, when we say come out, the State House, come out. We need to use our voices, especially if you're directly affected. It just kills me when, people who are directly affected do not use their voice. And that is the biggest weapon that we have, is our stories, our testimony. If we don't tell it, nobody knows, right? And so we have to tell the harm. We have to tell what is happening to us. And so I just say, use your voice and advocate and come out, please.
We have one question online that just asks what resources and programs are available, and if your contact information could be released. Are you willing, Leslie and Beth, it's really the two of you, have done so much, to have your emails provided? I think, because I think it was directed to Leslie and Beth.
Yes, I mean, our information is on justiceforhousing.org. My email is on there, and we also accept donations.
Committed to address the ID thing.
Of course.
So I just wanted to say, The Department of Corrections has been doing a lot to try to get the mass IDs and trying to get the birth certificates and social security cards. I do want to put that out there. In the same way that I said that we need to get DMH and DDS to come to the table, we need to get the Department of Transportation to come to the table. I have met with them and I've talked to them about the fees and the fines that interfere with people getting their driver's license, about the challenges with their onerous conditions for somebody to be able to get their ID. So I just, there's plenty of spaces to go around, but I just want to make sure that we understand that the Department of Corrections can't get that ID if the DOT doesn't want it. So let's get on them and make some changes. That's our
All right, so because I denied this gentleman the opportunity to ask a question of the last panel, you will have our last question of this panel.
Okay, so this is quite a different question. So the question I'm asking is basically, Leslie, how you got the spirit to, why we go for reform rather than revolution? In other words, to not put the perfect in the way of what could be achieved. I mean, before you started the work in justice for housing, but people thought it was simply impossible. They accepted, if you got a record or, you can't get that's it, period. And then at the same time, you've set up an organization which has brought about real change. So the question is basically about you personally, how you came to that.
This is my calling. When I lost my daughter, this became the catalyst for me. Helping people is basically what heals me, right? And in order for me to heal, when they take something away, they give you something else to work for. And this became my calling, and that is what motivates me and what keeps me going. It has nothing to do with notoriety, has nothing to do with monetary gain. It is helping my brothers and sisters come home, all right, and to succeed, because we want you to win.
What a beautiful way to end this panel and this program and this symposium. So I ended the last panel by thanking them for their service. And that is unbelievably true of all of you. Thank you for your service. Thank you to the 4 of you in here who are back in communities, and good luck with making sure you get housing and you get your education and you get your jobs, and you have amazing people in this panel who are out there every single day fighting the fight to help people. And so healing and helping, thank you, Leslie. I think for all of us, we're sorry for your loss, but look at what you've done with that.
Well, that's
With
my
that,
angel,
so-
that's my angel, and that's why, because successful.
Well, I think that angel is helping everybody here. So thank you all for coming.